to our principal sponsors, Reliance Industries. Through the convention, we will be conducting live polls during the sessions. Please do scan the QR code on your table or from the standees at the back of the hall to join the poll. The program is also being streamed on social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Once again, phones on silent mode. We will begin with the first session in a couple of minutes. The first session for the day is a CEO's panel discussion on navigating the unknown, making a new strategy compass. The poll question for this session is, companies are not interested in digital transformation now that the physical economy is back. We invite all of you to participate and share your opinion. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage Mr. Harshavardhan Neotia, Chairman Ambuja Neotia Holdings Private Limited, Mr. Pati Singhania, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, JK Paper Limited, Mr. Rajive Kaul, Chairman Nicco Engineering Services Limited, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, President AIMA and Chairman and Managing Director, CavinKare Private Limited, Mr. P. Balaji, Chief Regulatory and Corporate Affairs Officer, Vodafone Idea Limited, and Mr. Vikram Chandra, Founder, Editorji Technologies. Please welcome them with a huge round of applause.
Hello, everybody, and it's great to be here, and it's great to see such a packed hall this early in the morning, well, relatively early in the morning. And I think this is a particularly exciting and interesting subject to look at, because change is something that I think we are seeing, and the pace of change, according to many people, is only going to accelerate in the years ahead. So there are challenges, and there have been a lot of challenges in the last couple of years, more so than ever before. There's been the change related to the pandemic. There's been, challenges concerning supply chains, a war in Ukraine. And then there's this entire specter of the technological changes that are happening. Industry is getting disrupted. Everything which you once believed is going to be true, now you start questioning. Is it going to remain true? Is there a new challenger that is coming? Is technology a friend or an enemy? So those are some of the questions that industry is been dealing with. How do you navigate this? What is the compass that you need? What is the roadmap that you need to keep in mind? And how do you plan for it? Now, I think the panel that we have out here is one of the most outstanding panels to be able to answer many of these questions. So I'll just thank all of you for joining us in a quick, I mean, you've already been introduced, so none of you really need an introduction. But very quickly, Rajive Kaul, the chairman of Nicco Engineering Services. Thanks so much for being with us. Pati Singhania, vice chairman and managing director, JK Papers Limited. Of course, CK Ranganathan, who's the president of AIMA, so it's great to have you with us, and maybe we'll start with the opening comments from you. Harshavardhan Neotia, chairman of Ambuja Neotia Holdings Private Limited. Thank you all so much for being with us. So Balaji is going to say something at the very end of the process. But Mr. Ranganathan, why don't I start with you? You are, in addition to, everything else that you do at CavinKare, as chairman, as head of AIMA, when you're looking at this world, are you seeing more challenges or more opportunities with all the flux that is happening?
Thank you, Vikram. Good morning, all. So I see this is a very challenging time, but at the same time, it opens up quite a lot of opportunities. I think I would say that challenges are no lesser, but opportunities are much more than the challenges, is how I see. And I would say we are all seeing the fourth revolution that's happening, the technology, which used to be an enabler. I think now it is very, very clearly understood across the world. Technology is no more an enabler, but it's a very important strategic tool. And that, I think, is where it's going to take us or make us kind of the same. It's very important that we play it well. I see one more thing, if you allow me to. So one of the important things, if you look at that, is the world is changing. And it's always the CEO's very important thing as in terms of where do you invest, where do you stop investing? Because we are quite a lot of times, we have the data in front of us, all the CEOs if you look at, but still emotionally betting behind some of the areas. I think that needs to be stopped. The data are far more sharper and accurate. And there are predictive intelligence that have come in the form of AI. AI is a very, very important thing. That you know that whether it's going to give the bang for the buck. I think that's also a very important thing. The analytics, which used to be the kind of in thing in the last 1 decade, now it's artificial intelligence-laced analytics that's playing havoc in the kind of this thing. And this will differentiate which companies will stay on and which companies will go away. Therefore, it keeps me awake in terms of how we embrace technology, how we kind of this thing becoming more and more tech savvy. I think this is a very, very important thing. And the technology is fast changing. Half the time we keep educating our own people to upgrade and be ready for the future challenges. So that's what I would say. I will stop here and come wait for my next round.
I think there's one aspect of that which I would like to ask you about, that at what point do you disregard the data and go with gut feeling and instinct, right? Because sometimes you may have to do that if you really want to be disruptive. But you're right, I'll come back to you for that. If I can just ask you, Mr. Neotia, your opening remarks of how you see the overall environment, and then we'll get into sub-themes.
Good morning to everyone. Well, while I fully agree that technology is going to be one of the big disruptors and therefore a great opportunity too, I would just like to take one different point of view, and this is regarding how we have seen that COVID has caused a huge, should I call a fault line, between those of us who are more privileged and those who are not so privileged. And we have seen that there is a bunching of demand and opportunity for those who are privileged, and there has also been a lack of that to those who are not so privileged. And this divide is growing and has grown quite significantly. What, therefore, this will result in in the immediate future, and therefore how do we really combat this problem? Will it lead to social tensions? Will it lead to governments being focused on greater welfarism because of this nature of this divide, and therefore how does it impact inflation and a host of other governance related issues are something that we all need to think about, because I don't think we can increasingly live in a very, very polarized kind of a economic environment where some continue to benefit greatly and some continue to actually get further deprived from where they were. So I think this is an important challenge that this situation has thrown up, and we all need to put our heads, not such an easy answer, frankly, and not such an easy to comprehend the challenge also, but I do think this is a challenge that will come to us.
All right, the question of inequalities, I think it's particularly important because, again, with technology, it's possible, not just because of the challenges of the pandemic, but with technology, we're already seeing around the world, power gets concentrated, economic wealth gets concentrated, benefits get concentrated, what happens to everyone else? I think that's a very valid point to look at. Singhania, you want to go next?
Sure. Vikram, the way I see things is, we've talked about a lot of the challenges and also the opportunities, as CKR mentioned. But if I look at the world today, I think there are there are many things, but perhaps I'd like to highlight three things. Of course, the extreme volatility and uncertainty. I think gone are the days when, I suppose every CEO at every era said that, we're having a challenging time. But I think gone are the days of the 3 martini lunches. You can't do that. So it's extreme volatility in commodity prices, inflation, geopolitics, etc. Even if you're a domestic business, it's bound to have an effect. So navigating that and trying to make sense of that is the first point. The second point, I think, which sometimes we underrate, is because of technology and the complexity of today's world, the need to have a very differently skilled or a differently thinking workforce. Now, whether it's managerial or whether it is at lower levels, I think that is one point which many of us in organizations underrate. I'll give you an example. When we think, we are largely a manufacturing outfit, right? So when we start thinking in terms of people at our plants and factories, we say, okay, we need engineers, and who are these engineers? They're going to be mechanical engineers, instrument engineers, electronic engineers. But today, I think maybe we need to think like this. Machines are all highly automated, churning out huge amounts of data. So we really are talking in terms of saying we need people who understand data, can make sense of it, run these machines. So it's really software people we want to look at, which are connected to hardware and not the other way around, if you see what I mean. So there's a very different paradigm in terms of skills. And the third, which is inescapable, is the whole realization amongst all of us, as well as in society globally, about this entire climate change and sustainability matter. So whatever we do in business has to be aligned to that. So there are many, many things, but I would stop at saying that these is the way I look at maybe the 3 big imperatives for me as a CEO.
Okay, those are some very valid points. If I can get you, Rajive, to come in with your opening comments on how you see the landscape ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Vikram, and good morning to everyone from my side. What's been happening is change is always there. It's been constant over centuries. But what's happening now is that the pace of change is accelerating with each passing decade or even year. And if we see the scenario today, it's really rapid. Whether it's disruption, whether it's pandemics, any way you look at, and this impacts corporates, but before corporates, it impacts geopolitically, because very often geopolitical issues, more often than not, the geopolitical issues result in corporate challenges. And if one looks at, say, just the last 10, 11 years, I mean, 11 years ago, who would have thought that Brexit is going to happen? And that's brought a huge sea change in corporates working, say, in the UK. And indeed Europe, because, you know, they were both kind of interdependent on each other to some extent. Who thought 8 years ago that Trump is going to come into power from nowhere and actually bring in a different type of politics and leadership for USA, which impacted the world? Who would have thought 5 years ago that drones will change the shape of war, and you know, a small thing like a drone is going to, in a way, impact the mighty Russia? Whoever thought that? Nearer home, I mean, everybody's touched upon the COVID pandemic, but 4 years ago, other than a very nice movie which was made, nobody really thought of a pandemic on the lines of the Spanish flu, which is today 105 years ago. And based on that, 3 years ago, nobody thought that a vaccine could be rolled out so fast. Closer home, nobody thought that India would produce 4 billion vaccines, out of which 2.3 billion has already been given to people, and both sides of the divide. In fact, it was done so nicely that the people who were really challenged and the poor almost got same benefits as the so-called upper class and middle class. So, you know, I think nobody would have thought that Russia has to withdraw from areas today. Nobody would have thought that. I mean, it was, they knew that Russia was wanting to expand. So, you know, the pace of change is really increased, and perhaps during the course of discussions, we can touch on the corporate side also.
I think those points are all very relevant, and the fact that you could not think of a lot of what is happening today 3-4 years ago is actually the exact reason why we need sessions like this to look ahead a little bit. Because and I want to get all of your sense on this, for business to be really successful, I think with the pace of change accelerating, you've got to have the ability to try and forecast. Even though if the future is cloudy, you've got to try and forecast what will happen. Because to extend your examples, nobody in the hotel business would have thought 5, 7, 8 years ago that suddenly people are going to be happy just going and staying in random strangers' houses. But that happened. Nobody in the taxi business would have thought that people will just flag a taxi down on the road and, you know, get into it. Nobody in retail would have thought that people will just sit at home and order. So for businesses, if you can't forecast what might be happening, and a lot of this will be technologically led, you will have struggles. If I could just, before we come to some of this, you know, the forecasting part of it, just like to get your sense of, let's just finish with the challenges before we get on to the better part. If you had to, and I'll sort of go in this direction this time, Mr. Neotia, if you had to look at the environment right now, and there is a sense of gloom in many places because of, oh my God, inflation, oh my God, is a recession coming, interest rates are going up, there's a war, you know, oil prices. What would be the 1, 2, 3 areas which you would put as your biggest areas of worry? Policy uncertainty. What would you think are your biggest concerns?
Well, every time I think human beings have been faced with a challenge, we need to, instead of focusing outside, we need to focus inside. We need to go deep within ourselves and try to be a little more intuitive and introspective rather than to be consumed with the storm that is brewing just around. Because essentially what are we? The human race has survived so many challenges, and it's only because of the inherent resilience of the belief that we have a tomorrow and that tomorrow can be made pleasant. And we have to look for those things that possibly people need and want and find a way to address them. Just take, for instance, I'm just using a simple example. We had a typewriter which helped you write letters legibly. It's gone out of service. I mean, it's probably obsolete today. But the particular requirement of still typing out a letter hasn't stopped. It has moved to a computer and you use a keyboard. So I think once we go deep and try to understand, like people will want experiences. They would like to go out with families and spend quality time. Hospitality is here to stay, except that it may go through a challenge because human-to-human contact has become difficult to do in a pandemic situation. So when you can go deep in and you realize the inherent need for certain things, you will have to probably wait out the storm and then recraft your strategy in such a way that you can actually serve that need in a better way. So I think storms will come, storms will go. The human resilience has always been triumphant, and I so believe it will be in the future too.
There will be human resilience. Of course, there are some challenges and some storms like climate change, which you then start worrying whether they are existential threats. But, I mean, the follow-up to that may well also be that at times of challenge, sometimes there's a tendency to withdraw into your shell, to say there's a lot of uncertainty, these are scary times, let's not invest, let's not be ambitious, let's not borrow money, let's not have ambitious plans, let the dust settle, and then we will try and take, bigger bets. Is that what you're seeing in industry, or are you seeing the opposite?
I think the major problem, from my perspective, if you look at what I see is the inflation is shooting up, or the kind of this thing, the war is happening. Because of that, the oil price, everything is going up. Again, it boils down to inflation and so on. If it is common for my competition also, for entire this thing, if policy is an impediment, if it is common for my competition also, I'm not worried about that. So what is most worrying for me is the kind of how the rapid technological evolution, and if I don't catch up, I'll become extinct. If I don't make my people relevant all the time, then it is going to be a big problem for me. I think I don't want a slight edge to be taken over by my competition. And that's a very, very important thing. All the time, how do I take a slight edge over my competition, but I am not left behind, is how I see all the time. Whether it is technology or any other area, is even acquiring an adjacent profit pools, then if their profitability is going to be far more higher than me and they are going to throw more money, the kind of the thing in the game, then you need to be far more looking at that, how do I defend such kind of ammunition? While continue to look at what are the kind of opportunities that emerge, what are the new consumer needs based on the kind of rapid change that's happening, I think we need to continuously carve out new strategies and keep ourselves abreast of all the changes, our team. Or when I say that, it's not me alone, my entire team is what I would say. Because at the end of the day, the competition is the talent war. It's not money war. It's eventually a talent war.
Okay, worry about the talent war. I think that's one possibility. Looking at the top 4 or 5 challenges, how would you rank them?
Vikram, I'd already sort of mentioned in my opening remarks some of those challenges, but I think clearly issues currently around, it all comes back to uncertainty in many ways, but issues around inflation, interest rates, policy measures and responses on a global scale, because even if you're operating in India, you're not unaffected by what happens globally. So those would remain as number one. At the same time, like you asked just now, that given these uncertainties, are you going to go out and do something, or are you going to be a bit more conservative? I think it also depends on the business you are in or the business cycle you are in. But there is a tendency to be conservative if you are already somewhat stretched. But if you are okay on a financial standpoint, this is also an opportunity to be able to make certain bets. So I think we are also going to see situations where certain businesses will get bigger. That is inevitable. That's an inevitable part of of becoming a growing economy. But at the same time, in a country like India, which is something which is relatively new, is this whole ecosystem of startups. And because of technology, the ability for small businesses to really grow, taking into account ideas that are basically sound, is the great opportunity.
All right, and encourage startups and allow that to proceed. Your thoughts on sort of navigating some of this, and if you had to again look at the specific challenges, how do you think this is going to be poised in the investment cycle? Are you seeing the ability to say, I'm going to be treating this as an opportunity more than anything else and invest more? Or would people wait to see where the dust settles on areas around the global situation, you know,
Well,
inflation?
it depends on which business you're in.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give you two examples as we go through on the corporate side where I have personal experience. But, you know, I think the situation is in the old days, very often when we did scenario planning in the old conventional ways, we thought of, you know, what is the crisis going to be, and we used to try and find out what is the crisis and what sort of actions we need to take. But today is a day where I think all of us who are sort of in a position of leadership in the corporate world, and it's the same politically, you need to think of multiple crises happening at the same time, right? I mean, say when the pandemic came, it was just one crisis which led to other crises. When the wars come, there was the crisis of the war which led to the crisis of the oil and gas price hike, which has varying impacts depending on which part of the world you're in. And it's led to inflation globally. Absolutely. So you're dealing with three challenges or four challenges. In the pandemic, what happened? You couldn't get supplies. I mean, even if you know you had an automated plant, when you don't get supplies because of the logistics have broken down, you know your robots can't even produce, even though you may have no people in the plant. So the scenario planning today is got to be done on how one crisis impacts other aspects or all other aspects of your operations. And in a way, you know, AIMA has, I think you're aware of that, Vikram, because you've been there. In Horasis, we have one of our partners, Horasis. And this was maybe about 7, 8 years ago in Cascais in Portugal. There's a brilliant guy called Nicco, who's very much in your line. He was with BBC many years, then he went to Channel 4, ITN, etc. Today he's a visiting professor at King's College and doing a lot of research. He brought out a book on thinking the unthinkable. And what he had said and predicted through his research is happening on multiple fronts. And it's really fascinating. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that book or see his articles, but it's really very much the topic of today. Very much the topic of
No,
today.
absolutely, and I know Nick well, and he's very good at thinking, you know, of what the future is. And I'm going to move in just a few minutes to actually trying to look at crystal balls and see what's actually coming. Just want to quickly turn to policy, and maybe if I can start with you. We're hearing the government frequently, the finance minister and others, looking at industry and saying, we've done whatever you needed us to do from the point of view of reforms and other things. You need to invest a lot more. To which the answer is that yes, but there are still certain issues that you need to sort out, you know, policy stability and don't have harassment or whatever it is. What is it that you think the government can do, and what is it really that industry is asking the government to do to ease the entire, you know, to get the animal spirits back in a sense?
So I would say the policy, we have come a long way compared to where we used to be, kind of this thing, and we continue to improve. But one thing, if the government can continue to focus, they are already focusing, and not only the center, but also the states also, to ensure ease of doing business on all fronts. If we get into a world ranking below 10, I think that itself will sort out quite a lot of issues, is my viewpoint. So that's one important benchmark. There are a lot of policy impediments, kind of this thing, you get into a tangle. All these things can, I think, can wane away if we just focus on that particular parameter.
Neotia, focus on ease of doing business is one thing, and specifically within that, I mean, there seems to be recently a new area where reforms seem to be talked about are coming, like decriminalization, taking that as a part of reducing compliances, reducing burdens, reducing regulatory cholesterol, stuff like that. Is that one of the areas that you think the most urgent pending reforms are? Judicial reforms?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is definitely regulatory cholesterol in the system which needs to be addressed. I also think that what we were talking a little while earlier is to have some kind of a limitation, a time limitation, when things can be opened up, like we have in the income tax department. There are various other areas where it seems that you can go back to many decades, which probably is not possible to always answer with the information available. So I think that is very important. I think it's also very important to see how we have time-bound clearances, particularly when you have to take multiple approvals at multiple places. Often they are just stuck for really no reason, and there is no adverse reaction on the system for the delay. So can there be a process of having a time-bound clearance? And if there is a delay, then that has to be with substantive reason.
I think those are two really good suggestions that are made out there. Just your sense on that before I come to the others. What I think Mr. Neotia is saying about limitations is that you should not be able to just open up, or you should have a time period, right? 6 years or 7 years or 8 years, after which you don't come after businesses for XYZ stuff. Is that a very important pending reform, which I think could be done?
Most important thing, I would say, if you say mother of all, is definitely, you can't go behind and harass a person beyond a particular years. Everywhere, any law need to have a limitation of period before you can go in. I think that's what we discussed some time ago. I completely endorse that.
Any other reforms that you would have? So those are two. One is clear, because if any of the government's listening to this, they're saying, what do you want to do? So we've got two, I think, very strong ideas there. Mr. Kaul, why don't I come with you to you before Mr. Singhania? So one is that you should have a period of limitations, after which you cannot rake up old matters, like you have in income tax now increasingly. Second is have a very simple period of clearances, which should be there. Would you agree with those, and would you add anything else?
Yeah. I think the rollback period should be actually, they should not have rollback periods at all. I mean, why a 7-year limitation or anything? I mean, there should be a limitation. If you want to make life simple, income tax, which is 7 years, should not be 7 years where you can open the file. Why should it be 7 years? Today, you're in an age of digitization. Everything is computerized, right? Computers can start flagging red. Now, I'm not talking of criminal. Criminal, that's a separate thing. Criminal, even today, there is no time limit. And that can remain. But when it comes to sort of the civil side, you must have very, very short time. That will help ease of business phenomenally. But other than the ease of business, I think the pandemic has taught us many, many lessons. Harsh talked about one. I mean, both of us have certain areas in entertainment. He has in entertainment and hospitality. And we've learnt many, many lessons. One is a very simple lesson, that don't keep any fat at any point of time. And today, if many corporates across the world are doing much better, it's because they were forced to cut out the fat, literally, and really become slim. That's helped a lot. On the hospitality side, both of us have something similar to a theme park. We had zero income. I mean, when you have zero income, it's a real challenge, and you have to carry. You cannot just ask everybody to go home. You have to have a humane touch. So what sort of planning do you do? How do you carry people? So in our experience, we found, as far as the theme park goes, that our biggest expense in that theme parks was salaries and wages. So we said, and in the salaries and wages, the biggest was in the unionized cadre, people, ride operators and things like that. So we willy-nilly got them into confidence. We said the government has announced that we must at least keep paying full salaries. Initially, they didn't give a time limit. Then they said for 2 months. So we said, okay, we'll do that for you. But then, assuming this thing lasts a long time, the lockdowns, etc., what are we going to do? So, they voluntarily agreed because we took them in confidence at an early stage and said, look, we all have to take haircuts. We all have to make sure we are there to survive. I think that itself, for me in that business, the biggest learning was that if you discuss with everybody in an open mind frame, you can come to solutions which are acceptable, even in a difficult, so-called difficult state like West Bengal, where unions have unfortunately a bad name, but they are much, much better today, let me tell you, and they're good in fact today, not just better.
Right. Mr. Singhania?
Mamta didn't pay me to say that.
Okay. Mr. Singhania, what he said on the civil side is obviously relevant, but even on the criminal side, we've heard the Prime Minister repeatedly saying that I want to reduce the cholesterol and decriminalize. There are two ways of doing it. One is going forward by reducing the number of statutes. The other is to do exactly what Mr. Neotia suggested and said, even on the criminal side, if 7 years have passed, 8 years have passed, 9 years have passed, no one can come and say, explain this to me and why did you not paint your toilet 10 years ago and we are going to now, come after you and prosecute you.
If I may, what they've done is they've converted many civil laws into criminal laws. And that definitely is, I think, what you're referring to, and that's bad. But, where things are not done with a criminal intent. Yeah. And the government, just to make sure that their powers keep increasing, be it the bureaucrats or be it whoever, have been pushing gradually, year after year after year, right through the years, and it's not just a recent trend, pushing civil offenses into criminal, laws.
Yeah. Is this something that you think worries industry a lot? Because it's an open-ended question then, right? And sometimes it's very difficult if someone's asking you to explain something 8 years ago, 9 years ago, even on the income tax side, you don't keep the record. So that is something which you keep on hearing from industry is one of the biggest stress points, in addition to regulatory flip-flops.
No, absolutely. I think that is this whole point about increasingly civil liabilities turning into criminal is clearly a worrying point. And these things may seem softer, but at the end of the day, they inhibit your ability to take decisions. And we have seen, I don't have to name them, we've seen several well-publicized cases, including of public servants who took decisions at certain points in time and then they were hauled up over the coals decades later. Now, every decision that you take at a point in time, by and large, if your intent is correct, is a good decision. Because a decision taken, whether it's a yes, even a no, is better than procrastinating and not taking a decision. Now, time and circumstance may prove things to be different. That's a completely different matter. But at the end of the day, you can't be questioned on that with hindsight. So that's very important, Vikram. I think the other side is that, CKR talked about the EODB, the ease of doing business, but I think there's also the CODB, the cost of doing business. And all of this adds to the cost of doing business, if you look at it this way. Yeah. The other area I'd like to quickly touch upon is while the government has been pretty steadily trying to do away with obsolete laws, bring in reforms, deregulate, and do a lot of things, there are two inherent issues. One is we are seeing, however, certain regulators getting to be, I don't want to use the word powerful, but really getting into a lot of what I would call from a business point of view, interference, and without leading to productive results. So you keep on explaining. Today you look at compliance. while we do away with certain laws, particularly for listed companies and a whole lot of others, the amount of time that is spent by management on compliance issues is increasing, not decreasing. But I think that comes back to one fundamental point. And the point is the word trust. Do we trust each other? Now, obviously, there are going to be people who are going to misuse the system, be it business, be it in civil society, be it anywhere, even cheating in exams, for God's sake. I mean, all that happens. But at the end of the day, do we inherently want to build a society or an environment based on trust? And if we believe that, then I think it is important to do that. Now, certain actions of the government clearly point towards that. Self-certification and things. But on the other hand, you are being asked for so many things to give increasing amounts of information. I'm sure you see that in your business, Vikram, as well. So those are areas which we must understand. If we trust implicitly, and for the 2 or 3 or 4% who have done misdemeanors, you don't paint the same brush and start suspecting everybody.
I think that's a really, two really valid points which I'd like to get your reaction to. One, the question of trust people to do the right things. And secondly, as you said, even for bureaucrats, in fact, perhaps even more for bureaucrats, because if you've retired and you've been an honest bureaucrat all your life and you've retired and you have no way to defend yourself, you may not be able to pay for lawyers. And then somebody is coming and telling you, 15 years ago you took this decision. Why did you take this decision? It was a bad decision, probably an act of corruption. Now we're going to hold you up. Why will bureaucrats take decisions? Is I think the point that Mr. Singhania is making, and correctly so.
Yeah, before that I would like to add one more dimension, which is again under the umbrella of ease of doing business. You know that we have reformed our laws, quite this thing and all. But one thing that's still not happening in our country is waiting for judgments. Okay? The court proceedings, or even within the department, it takes so many years. Even some sales tax or GST or even kind of this thing, you have to fight uncertainty for kind of this thing. And you don't know whether it will end up in 5 years, 10 years or 15 years. I think that's a very important thing, that if that is also reformed, you get to know within a year or two, it's yes or right, whatever direction you can take. And that would be nice. Even at one level, then to go to multiple escalation levels, everywhere 4 years, 5 years, then it's 20, 30 years, it goes on. So that's I think, be it criminal or civil, everywhere that's one, this thing is what I would say. So I would very much agree with Harsh that trust is a very important thing. The government should come forward to do it more and more. They are doing it, but they can do still more and keep it far more this thing in terms of, that would help and facilitate a much better business environment is my viewpoint.
Right.
And
Yeah, your point about a bureaucrat being hauled up many years after retirement, it is true that it has set some people thinking about taking decision. I'll give you a very silly example. In one particular case, I happen to know the bureaucrat personally, and there was a routine approval that I was seeking, and I went to meet him, and he saw the papers, and he said that, yes, you deposit them, and they should be fine. So I said, sir, can I get the letter expeditiously? He said, hang on, expeditiously means what? I said, if it's fine, if you can kindly. So he said, no, we will send you a letter asking for some queries. Then when you reply to the queries, we'll send you a second letter asking for some more queries. And then when you reply to that, after that, we will wait for 30 days, and then I'll give you the approval, which will all take, say, 60 days. I said, but if it is open and shut, why? He says, you meet, later on somebody will say, what was your great need to hurry this up? So now this is something, because I happen to know the guy, he told me the story, otherwise I would have never known, that you'll go through this process just to see that you took reasonable time, you applied your mind, you did whatever you have to do on a matter that didn't require any such thing at all. It was very routine, very simple. Not at all requiring this. But even though he was known to me personally, he explained the reason and he said, listen, boss, this is how it will happen.
Wow. And you can understand that concern, right? Because Otherwise, if you're expediting it, then the assumption is, bhai kuch liya hoga. And we know that in business, you take decisions that are right and you take decisions that are wrong. But unlike the bureaucracy, if you go on looking at every decision retrospectively 5 or 7 or 8 years ago, virtually everybody in business would have been indicted for 1 or 2 really bad decisions that they took. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. But Vikram, I want to touch on one other thing that you made a brief mention about. And I think you were alluding to, or we talked about, the judiciary side of it. Yes. I think part of our problem has been that enormous amount of time or inordinate amount of time it takes to come to certain judicial decisions. And you have a whole bunch of other things along with that, under trials, etc., people being in jail for, without, the matter even coming up for hearing. But the real issue here, as I talk to people in the judicial fraternity, they say that we need far more number of benches. We need those benches to be filled. So we just need, simply to put it, we need much more capacity. And on commercial matters, I think there has to be a little bit of training and orientation of commercial benches, if I may say, to think from a business or a commercial standpoint rather than just looking at it in the letter of the law. So those are the two things I wanted to add on the judicial front.
Can I make a point, Vikram? See, I think what's happening is now generally we've moved, all of us, into a sense of what's wrong. Let's look at the rights. In your opening remarks, you said, how technology is impacting the world and how India has progressed as a result of technology to a large extent. Today, the sort of accounts that have been opened under Jan Dhan plan, it's incredible how money was transferred. The efficiency of transfer of money, I think someone yesterday said it used to be Rajive Gandhi himself, late Rajive Gandhi said only 25% reaches the desired. Now almost all of it reaches, right? So these things are there. It's happening in the corporate world. Why is India today become the 5th largest economy in the world? Okay, it is because of our youth, it is because of our population, but it is also because of the fact that our population has embraced technology. 600 million people, including many of the young kids, have those smartphones, which today you can get second hand for 2,000 rupees. So, So I think there's been a huge sea change. And I think, you're the moderator, but perhaps we could each give one example of how technology is helping us today, yesterday, and how it's going to help us tomorrow. With your permission.
You want to start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Say in again our theme park business, what's happening is AI is changing the way theme parks operate globally. And in India today, we are only scratching the surface. So if we don't rapidly go into AR, VR, we will be losing out to someone else who comes in, opens theme parks, and does other things where, you don't need to sort of just go on a roller coaster. Today, people in roller coasters overseas are being given those masks where you are here, but you feel as though you're in space, touching the stars. Right. Things are changing very rapidly, and we are now embracing these ourselves.
So if I could just add sort of the perspective to it before I get everyone else now in on this question of technological change, I think that's exactly why we are at a cusp, right? We have to end some of the things that have been holding us back, many of which are legacies of the past, delayed judicial systems, red tape, harassment, old cases, things. These are all some of the legacy issues that need to be done away with to clear a roadmap for embracing the very rapid technological change that we are seeing. And if you look at certain things that have happened, like the digital stack that you referred to, it's groundbreaking, it's path-breaking, and India has leapfrogged many people. So to do that, you need to remove some of the legacy issues and then move really, really fast ahead. Would that be a fair way, in your view, of looking at the things that set the stage to enable technology-led rapid growth in areas where India can then leapfrog? Remove the chains of the past and move fast.
Both the things will have to move parallelly. One side we will move ahead with technology, the other side we hope that some of this baggage that we're carrying of the past will find a new solution. So I don't think we can wait for one to get over to embark on the other. They will both be parallel tracks that we have to pursue together.
All right. I'm in agreement with the Neotia. I think it's very important thing is we need to do both parallelly going together, but technology with a slight edge. I would give a higher thrust on technology because that will definitely help us to create more jobs and because our technological revolution is serving most of the world population. And more we do that, it will also be nice. And also we need to use more internal for our own use. I think that I would very much in agreement.
If I could now turn to technological, change and technological transformation more. One of the issues that is happening, yes, we've got some absolutely brilliant startups there. And I think India is becoming a test case. I was referring to the payment stack, which is an experiment that is probably one of the best in the world. And there are other such technologies and stacks that can be built in India and rolled out in India. But for all the talk of, embracing technology, what is your sense? Is industry willing to do it? Because sometimes entrenched businesses, different from a startup. A startup doesn't care. Having come from an old media company, I'm now a startup, so I don't care what I'm disrupting. I'm very happy to disrupt it because I have nothing to lose. For more established companies, is it a bigger challenge?
Of course, it's a bigger challenge, Vikram. But look, take your own example. From what you were doing earlier, you must have started, you started with print, and then you went on to television, and now you're Editorji and doing that completely online. Now, of course, it would have been a challenge for you as well at some point, no, but this is not what I understand, this is not the way, but you did that. Now, therefore, I think there are two or three aspects, but I want to go back to the previous discussion very momentarily. I think what the government is trying to do is deal with some of the challenges which are inherent because of culture, because of the way we have been operating. You call it red tape, call it our mindset, call it whatever it is, and the human system, by leapfrogging or pole vaulting that using technology. So the example, for example, is the instance of the income tax, online income tax assessments and forms and the faceless kind of thing. It has its own dimension when you talk of larger cases, but for the majority of the people, if I look at our company, the majority of employees as individual taxpayers are much happier. As a corporate, as somebody who might have a larger income and you have scrutiny cases, that's a slightly different matter. But for majority of these things, and the same thing happened with the Jan Dhan thing and the cashless transfer that we have, the ability today for a chaiwala or your domestic to be able to transfer money to his or her home is immense, which was just not there yesterday. And also all of this does is it brings in so much more formalization of the economy, because that is one of the other sort of ills that we grappled with in India. How do we bring more? And if you bring more formalization of the economy, you can afford lower taxes and you can have higher government revenue. So there are a huge bunch of benefits that technology is bringing already in terms of government social policy. Now, the question you asked me about technology, but I think, Vikram, the issue is, yes, it is slightly harder for established companies to do that, but I think they have no choice, and everybody has realized that. If they had not embraced technology, businesses would not have been running in the pandemic. Go beyond that. Now, eyes have opened up, and we said, wait a minute. If business was running without anybody coming to office for almost a year and a half or two, how do we reorient our entire organizational architecture that we are able to take the benefits of lower costs and at the same time don't lose on efficiency on that front. Our own companies, I know that, across various companies, we have very major multi-year projects going which are using digitization or digitalization, I should say, and technology to completely reorient the way we do business. We'll still sell tires or paper or cement, but how we connect with the customers, how we do it, the way we take information about our processes, our manufacturing processes, how do we make it end-to-end seamless in terms of from vendor management to payments, how our entire banking system works, each and every aspect of it. And this is ongoing, because if we don't, we are either, as CKR said, either we're going to be left behind or we're going to lose on a big opportunity. And the last point I want to make on this, I don't want to make it long, is that if we don't do it, you talked about the startups, I did, they will disrupt you any which way. So you have to do it.
So let me just throw out one of the challenges. If you actually do embrace technology as we should, and you're looking in the future as we should, you were referring to my personal example, let me just draw on that to tell you what the real challenge is. And this is something which I wonder we can brainstorm a solution for. When I got into the business, everyone was in print. And we said television is going to come and television news is going to disrupt everything. People thought you were crazy. And by the time we started doing television, it was 6 to 7 years before television became more mainstream. In 2000, when we started to say that, okay, television is going to die and digital news are going to come and news and mobiles is going to come, people thought it was a crazy idea, and it really only took off 5 or 6 years from now. Today and for the last 3 or 4 years, when with Editorji, I'm saying, okay, all of this is going to be history. Now we're going to have AI-driven, personalized playlists. People still think you're crazy, and it probably won't make sense till maybe 3 years from now before it becomes mainstream. How do you push really advanced ideas? And this is something which I'm not sure India is as good at as some places like Silicon Valley. How are you able to get really crazy ideas out there to disrupt businesses, to disrupt fields? Because if we don't do it, somebody else will do it. The Americans will do it, or the Chinese will do it, and all. And we have the talent to do it.
He just pointed out that, therefore, AIMA takes a delegation year after year, and you've been on one.
I've been on many of them, and that's why I'm saying this. So you can see crazy ideas there being allowed. How do you replicate that here?
But the good point is that there are so many stars who are of Indian origin in Silicon Valley, and many of them are coming back and doing different things in India as well. So in a way, the startup culture, why did it begin here? It's probably because, we had thousands and thousands of us going there and understanding that culture and bringing it back. So,
But that's what, in a sense, I'm trying to question, because ideally, you don't want to have AIMA delegations going to Silicon Valley and saying, here are really bright, talented Indians who had fantastic ideas, and they went to Silicon Valley and they made the company successful. Ideally, you want to get delegations from America and China and the UK to come to India to say, look what these people have done, and it's path-breaking and it's changing the world.
They're doing it through money, incidentally. But
yeah, they're doing it indirectly, and in certain areas,
money,
people are starting to accept it. Like the payment stack, people are accepting. India's leapfrogged everyone else.
But that's also happening, Vikram. People are coming from other parts of the world, coming in an organized way, coming and studying what kind of new disruption that's happening in India. It's very much happening. But I think it's equally, having said that, I think we go and learn also. It's mutually, I would say. Some delegations have gone to China, some have gone to US, the Silicon Valley. I think this is happening for the last 5-6 years is my viewpoint. I have been part of both delegations coming to India, and I had the experience of that, and going to US and
people may be watching this who think they can find technological or other solutions for all the challenges that we have. How do they do it?
Well, if I just look at the startup ecosystem in India, which has been recent, very nascent, I would say, 3-4 years maybe, and the fact that we have more than 100 unicorns, which are now of Indian origin, is definitely an extremely interesting harbinger of the times to come. So if this can happen in this very short period, we were a Johnny-come-lately, we started much later than Silicon Valley did, but I think the ability for us to catch up and perhaps even upscale ourselves beyond some of the other countries is not very difficult now that we have already set that thing in motion. So I think it will happen. I think we are we are in a world which is so interconnected that really to say this is Indian and this is international and this is that is gradually going to get blurred because all these things are going to move seamlessly and technology has completely disregarded passports, visas, every border conceivable. So, you know, it just flows through. I mean, there's no way to stop it. So I think it will happen. It will happen in our country very soon.
Okay, so I think we're nearly at the end of the session. I'm just going to get a one-word answer from each of you. This is about having a compass and looking into the future. When you look at the future 5 years from now, would you be optimistic or pessimistic on balance?
Well, 5 years from now, I'm very confident that India will have overtaken the German economy and we'd be very, very close to the Japanese economy. And that will be substantively as a result of our embracing technology, both geopolitically and corporate-wise.
All right. 5 years, optimistic or pessimistic on balance?
Bloody optimistic is what I would say, and pardon my French for that, for the reasons that he mentioned. I mean, India is unstoppable. It's the perfect storm. Maybe I'm exaggerating a point, but really the whole intersection of people, human resources, the technology, and the desire, I think, at the policy-making level, the grand plans, I think they fit in well. It's the execution piece that if we can do better, we can do it faster.
All right, bloody optimistic. That's the way to sum that up.
I think I would agree with Harsh. I'm extremely optimistic about India's growth story. And we have a lot of challenges are there, but I think we will overcome all these things and we'll emerge as very, very strong power to reckon with.
Well, I would like to see, and I think it will happen, that our democracy, which has been seen as often very noisy and chaotic, will itself be the single biggest asset in the next 5 years. Our democracy will prove to the world that through a dialogue, through process of all kinds of challenges, we will emerge to become a resilient and sustainable economy, unlike our very big neighbor where we often hear immense amount of economic success, but often not so sure about the transparency. We talk about its opaqueness, etc. So I think India will show the way to the world how a very large democracy can actually be successful and functioning.
All right, how a large democracy can be successful and functioning. If I can sort of sum up what I think everyone was saying out here, golden bird, poised to fly, ready to fly, probably will fly. Yes, a few chains which are still holding it down need to be cut and severed, then enable it to fly faster. So Balaji, let me toss it over to you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's a privilege for me to draw the curtain down on a very exciting and important discussion. I would truly call it a masterclass from Mr. Neotia, Mr. Singhania, Mr. Ranganathan and Mr. Kaul. I think we've been fabulously enriched by their fascinating experiences on this panel, their unique experiences and perspectives on navigating the unknown. The session itself has yielded a lot of learnings for all of us. So a big thank you to all of you. And I must say, Vikram, thank you for moderating this session. Such great stalwarts, and the way you did it was fabulous because you got a certain gravitas to the discussion, and your observations and questions and pivoting, if I might say, which you've done in your professional life was fabulous. So thank you very much for that. I think, ladies and gentlemen, each one of us would have drawn our own takeaways. I learned a lot from this session. I think what our business leaders here were telling us that all of us need to be less worried about adversity. I think that's a big message. Remember, there's going to be uncertainty. What they say is what you don't see will scare you a lot more than what you see because you can assess what's going on. I think that was a big message that came from them. They talked about many, many unexpected events, starting from the pandemic. Then there was a talk about domino effect of lockdown, supply chain disruption, demand and revenue disappearance. They talked about sweeping shift to digital. They spoke about logistic logjam, inflation, now, of course, the geopolitical shattering of a global economic order. And I think they also said that in all of this, there have been some surprise windfalls for some, but for many, they've been scarred by frequent shocks. And clearly what was the big message from all of them is none of us could have claimed that we knew what was coming our way. I think that was a very, very big observation, but something that they spoke all about. A few things that they also advised us as leaders to be aware of to respond. One, technology is just not an enabler, but a strategic tool, right? Whether it's AI, whether it's about embracing technology stacks or platforms. That's something that they talked about. Second, they said data now stares us in the face, but as leaders, you have to take judgment calls and go beyond emotions. I think that was a very big message that they gave us. Third, there was a lot of talk about social dimension of the disruption. There are privileged few and there are the less privileged ones, and that these social tensions need to be looked at and embraced in terms of what is it that we can do as corporates to be doing the right thing for the larger society and not just our companies. I think that was something that was spoken about. The focus on inside, assess what's going around you, but then and start to worry a little bit about your current talent pool and how to upskill them and also look at where the future talent pool can come from. They talked about nimbleness and about making sure about thinking the unthinkable. Rajive spoke about that. A lot of discussion on stakeholder engagement and building trust. They said that is very important, whether it's with employees, whether it's unions, whether it's government, to make sure that the ease of doing business happens and so on. So I think these were just my few takeaways. There are a lot more that was said by these leaders, and I'm sure each one of you have your own checklist, if I may, that you would take to your leadership journeys ahead. But before we end this session, I would just request AIMA to present mementos to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I request Mr. Ranganathan to present the mementos to the esteemed speakers, please. Thank you once again, sirs. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break and shall start our next session at 11:30 a.m. sharp, a fireside chat on leading with purpose. We also have the results out of the poll question that we asked. Companies are not interested in digital transformation now that the physical economy is back. 15% people agree, 75% disagree, and 10% can't stay. We will see you all at 11:30 a.m. Thank you.
AIMA works as an overall India-wide organization for management. It has for long supported promoted and nurtured the management movement. And it's also reached overseas to try and connect the world with India as well.
So whether you're a young student out there or whether you're a practicing professional, I think being a member of AIMA will give you a huge network, will give you a huge range of new concepts, and it gets you access to events where you really get to meet some of the best and the finest speakers in the country from whom you can learn.
You know, every manager needs to be updated in terms of the latest techniques, the latest thinking, the latest direction. You update yourself in various aspects of disciplines that one is involved in.
We are about to begin with our next session. I request you all to please take your seats. The poll question for this session is, ESG metrics are helping investors but not the environment, social and governance causes.
We'll be very happy to
Please do share your
half
opinions.
a day there if that's of interest to you.
I once again request you all to please settle down.
And Parminder will be able to coordinate that, and we do this for a lot of customers come there, stakeholders.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting our next session now. Please settle down. Please take your seats. Please welcome on stage with a huge round of applause Mr. Rishad Premji, Executive Chairman, Wipro Limited, who will be in conversation with Mr. Sunil Munjal, Chairman, Hero Enterprise.
Thank you.
May I request Mr. Sunil Munjal to please conduct the session.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome Executive Chairman of Wipro, Rishad Premji, for this conversation.
Thanks, Sunil. Thank you.
Thank you for making the time and coming here to be with us this morning. Rishad, you are Executive Chairman of one of the most respected companies, one of the largest companies in the country. You come from a very renowned family, but for some reason, very little is known about you yourself. You are either a very private person or you've hidden everything there is to know about you. So I just thought, since we have you captive here and we have to talk of ESG, why don't we start with something a little bit more personal and then switch over. I remember reading a while ago that you were billed as the second most eligible bachelor in this country.
I don't know about that, but sure.
I read it in one of the well-known magazines here, actually. And then you went and married your school sweetheart, Aditi. So what was the change that happened for you getting married, and what did it change in your life?
Yeah. No, first of all, it's good to be here in person. It's glad to be at events that are actually happening physically in person, Sunil. So one is, I'm a deeply private person, so those kinds of questions make me deeply uncomfortable, and just generally...
That's why I'm asking them, actually.
Generally, any sort of visibility sits very uncomfortably on my shoulders, and people oftentimes ask me why that is, and it's just chemistry. It's just the way I'm built. There's no right or wrong about it, Sunil. But it's, I've known my wife for many, many years, since I was 16 or 18. I've never heard about what you just mentioned. But, I've just organically grown into what I've been doing, Sunil. To share a little story, I did two things, interesting stories. One is my father worked at Wipro, and my father's work at Wipro was his job at Wipro. I knew nothing more than that people's parents work. My father worked. I remember for the first time this was maybe in 99 or 2000, and Wipro had really sort of come on its own, and the stock market had exploded, and the market cap was high, and Mr. Premji had become a wealthy person, and my mother was trying to hide the newspaper from me. So I wouldn't know that, right? So that's the kind of oddity that I grew up with, arguably. And you know, at 30 years old, I was living and working overseas, and I decided that, look, if I don't give coming back to India a chance, I never will. And if I don't come back and give working at Wipro a chance, I never will. And I actually went through quite a formal process of inducting myself into the organization, meeting board members, actually sort of, you know, interviewing for jobs within different parts of the organization. And so that brings me to where I am today. And honestly, if you would ask me 15 years ago if I'd be sitting here today, I would have, honestly, the truth is, said I have no idea. So it sort of worked out organically. But you know, the one element that I struggle with is how do you manage the privacy with the terrain of the job?
So you're right on two accounts. Your process of induction into the company was much publicized, by the way, including the interview sessions that you had with some of the senior executives in the company and outside. And I think that's actually a very good sign. But having looked at yourself as a professional, as a chief of strategy, and now in this new role, executive chairman, what's the big difference you find for yourself, for your own day-to-day work and your own approach to the company?
Yeah. No, so one is, you know, as I said, it organically happened. It wasn't something that I was on a structured path to get to. As head of strategy, I was much more operationally involved, Sunil, in the job, you know, in the company. I had a very clear mandate, had very clear goals and objectives that were I reported to the CEO of the company, I did reviews and got appraisals like anybody else in the organization. As chairman of the company, my job is really, and I'm an executive chairman, and people oftentimes ask what an executive chairman does. An executive chairman shows up to work every day. An executive chairman gets paid by the company, and I'm an employee of the company. So that's a couple of elements. But my job is to enable our CEO, and we have a professional CEO who runs the company. And I spend my time, I think, I would say on 3 or 4 big things. One is I spend my time with customers that I know, customers that I have a relationship with that can be of value add. I spend a lot of time with our board and ensuring that we have the right board, we get the right value out of the board, that we are demanding and pushing them and yet have their autonomy and independence that they bring to the table. I involve myself in any large capital decision, whether it be large M&As, dividends, any sort of big capital decisions. And then I spend a lot of my time with people. I spend 30% of my time with people, just meeting people one-on-one inside the organization, agenda list, just to get a sense and smell of what's happening inside of the organization. And the thing I've been spending the most amount of time, I would argue, Sunil, over the last 3 years, is on culture and cultural transformation, which I have really come to appreciate over COVID is important.
What does culture actually mean to you?
Culture is the smell of the place, right? It's how things happen inside of an organization.
Before you go there, I want to just go back a little bit, again, into a little bit of your own past. I believe once when you were in London, you asked your dad permission to stay at the company guest house.
Right.
And he said, sorry, this is the company's guest house.
That is a true
story. Not our personal home.
Sorry?
So not our personal property, it's the company's guest house.
That is true.
You could not stay there.
That is true.
So some of this high level of integrity has been DNA of the company.
Right.
So what is it that you think is the requirement of culture as an interface with society at large?
Right.
And what are you doing to create that transformation? What do you think the need is?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I'll just talk about culture in the organization first, right? You know, we have a deep-rooted value system in the organization. It's been articulated, it's been institutionalized over the last 51 years. You know, they've changed a little bit over the last 51 years, but the essence of it has not changed. But when I took over as chairman, one of the big learnings I had, Sunil, is that, you know, it's great that you articulate these values, but if people don't experience them every day, it means nothing. That was one. The second learning was that people don't experience your values. They experience your behaviors every day, right? And then they interpret whether you live your values or not. So for example, organizations say they're respectful, but if you're rude and abrasive and use foul language and don't listen to people, they're not inclusive, don't give candid feedback, you're not demonstrating your values even though you claim to have values, right? So one of the things I spent a lot of time over the last 3 years was how do you bring these values to life in the way it shows up every day? And so we call these things the 5 habits, which are our ways of working. And the beauty of habits and behaviors is you can control them. You can control them even though you're not experiencing them. Because you can create an amazing experience for your team even though you're having a crappy experience from your boss and your peers, etc. And that's your responsibility as a leader. And how do you create that smell?
What these 5 are?
Yeah, so they're about, one is about being respectful, the other is being responsive. The third is always communicating. So how do you communicate, share information inside the organization? The fourth is demonstrating stewardship, which means The company comes first always. And the last is about building trust and building an equation of trust, especially in a post-COVID world where, today we have less than 10% of our people coming in, 100,000 new people among 250,000 people. And how do you build trust in an organization where people are not connecting and smelling each other? So we're spending a lot of time on this. I've done 99 sessions personally. I've met 30,000 people personally. And I think it makes a big difference in connecting with people on these elements of value and culture.
So the company has seen lots of change in the last few years, especially at the senior level, CEO, yourself as chairman. And in these changes, is this also your method of showing continuity when you talk about the experience of values? What of these are old behaviors? What is the new introduction that you made in these?
Yeah. No, so I think there's incredibly importance in continuity, by the way, continuity of values which have been there for the last 51 years. I think the element that we realized for Wipro as an organization is over the last decade, we didn't, frankly, very transparently, didn't perform to our potential. It was a lost decade in many ways for the organization. And so one was reflecting as to what was the challenge there. Because we really believed we had good ingredients, strategy, people, accounts, purpose, in which we can talk about in a bit. And yet those good ingredients were not showing up in a good dish consistently. So the theory that I had was that something was happening in the kitchen. Something was happening in the way we prepared this dish, in the way the space was organized, in roles and responsibilities. We were not collaborating, highly siloed mentality, trust deficit. And so the objective of these habits was to try and reinstate that mindset of moving to one Wipro mindset, moving to a strong element of trust, moving to a strong element of sharing your best people, helping other parts of the organization when there's no benefit for you, et cetera, because it was not showing up every day, so people were not experiencing it.
But you operate in some 60 plus countries, you have 250,000 people working with you, completely diverse in terms of age, in terms of background, ethnicity, even languages and culture. So how, across such a diverse organization, do you build a common culture? Yeah. And I mean the how now, not the what, because you told us what it is. How do you actually do this?
2-3 things. One is you just connect with people. You just actually spend time. I have spent 300 hours, 325 hours in the last 18 to 24 months just meeting people and telling stories. People love to hear stories, Sunil. People hate PowerPoint presentations. People like to hear stories about what is important, why it's important, how it shows up in your personal life, in your organization. So you spend a lot of time connecting with people. A lot of them I get feedback that, we thought we were coming into a boring 2-hour session on a PowerPoint presentation and all we heard was stories. So I think that's incredibly important, right? The other thing I think that's incredibly important is how do you show up in terms of what you stand for as an organization. So we've always deeply believed that you cannot be divorced from the communities in which you live and breathe as an organization. And that's incredibly important to people. People join us because of those. I know oftentimes when I meet senior leaders, they tell me that 2 or 3 reasons I'm joining the organization. One is what do you stand for as an organization? And the other thing which I think is very compelling, which also ties to our purpose and culture at some level, is the fact that we're owned by a philanthropic institution. The fact is 66% of the economic interest of Wipro is irrevocably owned by a foundation. So 66 cents or 66 paise of every rupee or dollar we make goes to a good cause, and it matters tremendously to people. It matters to a global audience. It matters to people based here in India. And I'm amazed as to how compelling an argument that becomes. I'm really amazed. It shocks me every day.
So you created the position for a chief growth officer. Is that not the role of the CEO or the executive chairman? Why do you need an actual separate growth officer?
No, the argument was very simple. The argument was, you have lots of functions in the organization. Typically, organizations have a finance function, an HR function, a technology function. How can you not have a sales function, right? And that's the role of the chief growth officer, is how do you really institutionalize the science and the excellence of selling, which is an art, which I'm learning personally myself over the last 18 months as to how little I knew about the art of selling, right? When you win a deal, you don't win because you're the best solution or the best price. You win because you have a win strategy. You have a sales strategy to win. So that was the objective of the growth office, to how do you bring a very strong mindset of selling and growth obsession inside the organization.
I want to go back to the point you just made. your father has been an example for many of us as to his behavior, his attitude, his civic mindedness, his service orientation. I know for a fact, and this is a personal experience, he would come every year, once, sometimes twice a year, saying, Sunil, I want to have lunch with you, or I want to have dinner with you. I'm making a sales call. I tell him, no, you don't need to do this. I'll come and see you. I mean, you're such a senior person. You're both older than me and so much more senior. And I'll come and see you. He said, no, you're the customer. I'm going to come to you. And it just blows you away as to what kind of an example he set. And the second thing he did, and I believe it's obviously a family decision, that the ownership from the family moved over to a foundation. Now, of course, there are some examples in India, but there are few and far between. Why do you think this is important? And what do you think it signifies to the people who work inside the company? And does it even matter to those outside?
Yeah. So there are two distinct components which I think is important. One is the efforts that Wipro as a company makes in its own journey of the Wipro Foundation, its own journey of purpose, its own efforts around ESG, and we can talk about that as well. The other is the personal effort of the shareholder of the company, right? And they're distinct attributes. Oftentimes people confuse those two because they see them as one. But from a shareholder perspective and from a personal perspective, the logic was very simple. That, right, to whom much is given, much is expected, and you cannot not do something when you have this kind of wealth and this kind of good fortune, because life is so much about good luck, right? I always joke, I would any day hire a lucky person than a smart person, right? So much about life is about luck, and so much about how things turned out for Wipro was just being at the right place at the right time, right? So that was the fundamental thinking, that you just cannot consume and you cannot not do something with this. And so that was the journey that began 22 years ago in 2000.
So you've also rejigged the firm from being industry verticalized to being market verticalized. Is that the same logic you use for the Chief Growth Officer?
No, the logic simply was, how do you get, Sunil, how do you become and drive much deeper proximity to customers, right? How do you be much closer to customers geographically was the logical thing to do. And it helped deeply simplify the organization by being much closer to the markets you work in and the customers you serve. So if you're in North America, you serve North America customers. If you're in Europe, you serve European customers. If you're in India, you serve India customers. And you all get the best of the capabilities of Wipro as a market. So it was simply to drive deeper proximity to customers and to deeply simplify and demystify the complexity in the organization.
In the old days, we used to talk of this cost arbitrage of doing work in India for this industry specifically, and also for extensions of this industry. And even at that point, this question used to be asked, is this a permanent advantage? Because a cost advantage, as you know, has a habit of moving geographies. It's happened in the world across history. If you look around, you know, it moved to Europe at one time, and then moved to the US, and then moved to Japan, and then moved to Taiwan and Korea. It's constantly moved. So was that the logic of this shift, or was it something deeper which drove this change?
In the industry, you mean
for Wipro?
No, in terms of the structural change, you mean?
Yes.
No, I think the structural change was just simply something specific to Wipro. But the comment you made on talent, I think, is incredibly important, right? Because it's very interesting for the model. People came to India for cost. They stayed for quality, right? And this was the story of the last 20 years. There's something that's deeply changed in my mind over the last 2 years, where India has become a unique talent destination. And given the fact that there's a major mismatch between supply and demand, people are coming to India because that's where the talent is. The fact that they also benefit from a better cost play is important, but it's not the primary or the exclusively primary reason people are coming to India. And that's a deep, deep change today, right? And I think both the industry as well as with support with government, there's a huge, huge focus on really ensuring that India maintains its advantage as a talent destination in the world.
I sometimes get surprised that we tend to be surprised ourselves in India. India has provided talent to the world for a long, long time, whether it's in technology, science, health sciences, literally across the board. You look at successful ethnicities of individuals, whether it's doctors in North America or it's, I was talking to a friend of mine who's, they have an association of successful healthcare specialists in North America, and he's saying the single largest ethnic community of successful doctors is Indians.
Yeah.
And if there were no Indians in the UK, the NHS would completely collapse. It's the same with whether you're looking at software industry or you're looking at accounting or you're looking at legal services. It's pretty much across the board. So the talent amongst Indians has never been in question. It is the ecosystem that we built for ourselves, which I think in many ways held us back, which is why the big part of the reform that's been happening for the last 30 years is to let go, is to loosen up, is to allow individual and corporate enterprise to flourish.
Yeah. And I think the one advantage here, Sunil, also is this is on scale.
Yep.
So this model is really on scale. So, oftentimes you have a few stories, but this is really 5 million people employed by the industry, right? 2 years ago, it was 4.5 million people. In the next 2 years or 3 years, it'll get to 6 million people, right? So it's a real advantage at scale with great support by the ecosystem and how do you upskill, reskill people to continue to maintain that advantage, which I think is a unique space for India at the moment.
So as a company, you've done some 20 odd acquisitions. Was scale the reason and logic?
Yeah.
Or was there something else which drove this? And having acquired them, as you well know, there are enough studies to show that anywhere between 70 to 80% of acquisitions fail to meet their original objectives. And the big reason for that being the cultural fit amongst the two organizations, or the final one that gets built of the two or more than two that are put together. How do you actually handle that part of the challenge of acquiring?
Yeah. Look, to me, Sunil,
first, why so many acquisitions?
Yeah.
And then this second part.
No, I think two things. One is I'm a big believer in M&A. I'm a big believer in M&A for very disruptively accelerating change. I'm a big believer in M&A because it very, very visibly communicates that you are changing and making big investments in certain areas. From our vantage point, the objective of M&A is twofold. It is not a play on growth. It is not buying growth. It is buying differentiated capabilities, right? And the capabilities are either new capabilities or new market access. And so that's been our journey over the last 24 months in terms of the 6-7 acquisitions that we've done. How do we bring differentiated capabilities into play into the organization? The learning on making M&A a success is a mixed bag, like with many acquisitions, right? And I really believe it's a portfolio play. If you can get 6 out of 10 right, you've done a good job.
Yeah.
And each approach on how we integrate is very, very different, basis the complexity of the company, basis the uniqueness of the company. Because the last thing we want to do is we want to destroy what is unique about the company by trying to integrate it too quickly. And most of our acquisitions are, in fact, all of our acquisitions are revenue acceleration focused, not cost focused. So there's limited arguments of just bringing things together to synergistically create cost value. It's all about revenue acceleration, and we try and bring the go-to-market engine together very, very quickly without necessarily integrating everything together very early. But I'm a big believer in M&A.
So the growth argument that you have clearly has worked for you as a company, and while you yourself have pushed the company to get closer to its real potential, I think that's a smart move. All of us need to constantly look at our potential and fill the gap, because if you believe you've reached where you need to, you're only going to go downhill from there. So I think that's a good approach. But we've also seen this growth in the world. This enormous growth over the last 70 to 80 years, and the economic model that the world has followed has done a tremendous job in improving people's quality of life. But at the same time, what it did do was create massive disparity in those who were not as successful. And we have seen real examples of this across the globe, especially in countries like India.
Yeah.
We still have millions of people who don't get 2 square meals a day. And that gap, well, all of them are doing a little bit better than they were, by the way, but the gap has grown. And the compact between industry and society clearly needs to undergo some shift and some change. It is clearly under a lens right now, and there's a big pushback even to questioning this method of economic modeling that we have followed. Which is why I think companies that reach out, individuals and groups of individuals and organizations that reach out beyond themselves to try and help and support those less fortunate, I think are playing both an important role as examples and actual change makers in society. Your company has done that. Your foundation has done that with even deeper impact. Do you want to walk us a little bit through what in your company is the essence of this?
Yeah.
Why do you do so much of this? Yeah. And what do you think you benefit from?
So it's a great comment and observation, Sunil. I'm a big believer organizations are living beings, right? They're not human beings, but they're living beings, and they have a deep responsibility to the communities in which they live and breathe, and they cannot be divorced, right? You know, and we can debate, because it's debatable, what the direct profitability benefit of doing some of these things is, but just as a responsible citizen of the communities in which you live and breathe, you have a responsibility to the communities in which you live and breathe. I think that's very important, number one. Two is it's remarkable, I think, how much COVID has accelerated this mindset of being a responsible citizen as an organization. You know, many companies over the last couple of years did put employees first, said, look, the safety and the security and the mental well-being and the physical well-being of our employees is incredibly important. Third, I find customers, all our stakeholders, but particularly employees, are becoming a bit activist on this, which I love. The fact is they are challenging you to saying, hey, look, I want to work for a company that is responsible, that cares about the environment, that cares about our well-being, that cares about high standards of governance. Investors care about this. So more and more stakeholders across the value chain, whether they be customers, whether they be investors, whether they be employees, are asking this question deeply. I'll give you a very simple thing which has become a reality, you know. Things like the environment and what you're doing on sustainability, and things like diversity and inclusiveness used to be page 45 of an RFP. They are now in the first 5 pages, right? I remember hearing about the story of a customer situation where there was a lady CIO and 10 people walked into this meeting, 1 woman, 9 men, and her first comment was, are you kidding? Right? And that's happening, and our customers are global, so maybe the change is more progressive overseas than it is in India today, but you cannot not be part of this movement, A, because your customers are demanding it, your stakeholders are demanding it, but most importantly, it's the right thing to do. So that's our journey, and I'll share a couple of things that we're doing because I think they're useful to share. One is, you know, on the environment front, we've been very focused on sustainability for the last 15 years. It became a little bit more fashionable with ESG over the last few years, but our commitment to the environment, our commitment to water, to waste, to biodiversity has been very strong, and we try to formalize it over the last couple of years where we've said we want to transform to net zero by 2040, and I mean true decarbonization. You know, 95% plus of it will be decarbonization, not carbon offset. And we're going to do a couple of things. We want to be 100% renewable by 2030. We're at about 50% today. We want 100% of all our official vehicles to be electric vehicles by 2030. So we're driving some of those elements and very purposeful and commitment. The big challenge we have today is scope 3. How do we ensure that our business air travel comes down, how our employees commute, how they carpool, etc., because that's going to be how our suppliers show up. So that's one big element. The other is a very purposeful focus on diversity. You know, you have to be diverse before you can be inclusive, and inclusive is a mindset. Right? You have to show up diverse before you can decide whether you want to be inclusive or not. And I'll share some statistics which are shocking for the company. 2 years ago, of our top 800 people in the company, 6% were women. That's embarrassing, right? Today that number is 13%. We'll hopefully get to 16% by the end of the year and be 20% by the end of the following year. But that's still embarrassing. It's 20% of our leadership is women. We are focusing deeply on that. We're trying to see how we can get women to come back after maternity. How do we make it attractive and exciting for them to come back? So
there are 2 aspects I want to bring out of this. So incidentally, we as a company started doing some of this stuff about 40 years ago, including on air quality and water consumption and recycling, etc. We were seen as oddballs at that time. But as a corporate culture, we don't make any announcements of this stuff, or never used to. So this is a balance which is a little bit of a difficult one. How much do you do, and how much do you talk about what you do? Because culturally, for many of us, and this is maybe an oddball Indian behavior, that it's not considered nice to talk about things that you do. But increasingly people are saying those that are exemplars need to be seen, need to be heard from. Where do you draw that line? Because again, individually, people are extremely private individuals,
Right.
and you rarely talk or are seen to talk about anything about yourselves. So how do you manage this in the company?
You know, there's a term I learned in the last 6 months. It's called humble bragging, which, you know, sits uncomfortably, but, you know, it really resonates, right? Because at some level, you have to figure out how you talk about things you're doing, because they can encourage people. It matters to stakeholders that you work with, that they know what we're doing as an organization. So, you know, we have a lot of new leaders who've joined us in the company. And one of the things they're constantly pushing us to do is to talk more about what we're doing and what we care about as an organization. A, because they feel it's more important in customer situations, but also they're proud of it. And so we're realizing how we're not talking about it enough, and we are going to get a little bit less modest about some of the things we're doing, because I think it not only selfishly helps us as an organization in terms of the actual business, but I think it also encourages other people, and hopefully we can, with all modesty, be a role model for others as well.
Yes, we've not figured this out yet, I should tell you, because we still struggle with this a lot. And our default option is to not talk. Right. And we've both been criticized for it, and we've been pushed sometimes, including at the UN, etc., to go out and at least tell people some of the things that you do. So I'm myself still struggling with this a little bit, but increasingly I'm of the view that we should talk,
right,
but not yet been able to do this. So maybe we'll have a separate offline conversation about this.
And if you figure it out, please let us know as well, because we're still learning this very much.
So I want to bring the audience into the conversation, because you're a uniquely interesting individual who's not often available to talk to. So if anybody in the audience has a question to ask, please raise your hand. And are there slips of paper going around?
I think there are a couple of people, but I don't know how. Oh.
Okay, if you can get these to me, please.
Oh, they can't ask it by themselves, you have to.
Yeah. Thank you. So, your father has created the largest charity. How do you plan to keep it sustainable over the next generations?
Yeah. No, the foundation is a fully functional, independent, professionally run organization, right? It has a large team now. We're 1,600 people across the country. We have a professional CEO. We have professional leaders running it. So it's completely independent of family to keep it going, right? The family plays an important role in terms of being a strong trustee of the foundation and what it does and doesn't do. But it's a highly professional setup, so in which individuals beyond a certain point become irrelevant.
That was a question from Mr. Amin Ladakh from GMA, Goa. Where do you see yourselves 5 years from now, given the changing world order? I don't understand what is meant by the changing world order. This is from, I'm sorry, I can't read the names. Sunny Goyal? My career.
Sorry.
So where do you see yourself 5 years out?
As a company, you know, I mean, technology is changing so dramatically and disruptively every year. But look, I'm a big believer that there's a huge value for technology services companies, because the reality is that we see ourselves as an orchestrator for our customers, right? The reality is customers have a whole spaghetti that exists inside their worlds. They have a lot of historical legacy stuff inside of the organizations. They also have a lot of new age stuff and new age capabilities they're bringing inside the organizations. And how can you make sense of all of this? Because people don't care about what technology they're consuming. People care about the business benefit that they get from that technology. And so there's a huge opportunity for, I think, technology services companies. So I'm incredibly bullish about where the technology services industry goes over the next 5 years. The biggest concern I have is talent. The biggest concern I have in terms of both being able to retain talent as organizations is also being able to upskill talent. And my concern for retaining, Sunil, comes from this deep lack of connectedness that exists in the organization today. As I was sharing, 100,000 people who've never walked into the office over the last 18 months, 24 months, who have no emotive connect with the organization.
So let me push you a little bit on this. You made a comment recently for which you got lambasted about people being on the job or moonlighting. What did you actually mean?
So, you know, I've never got so much hate mail as I got for that, and I think it was meant more sincerely than people interpreted it. But if you actually look at the definition of moonlighting, Sunil, it is having a second job secretively, right? So that's point number one. Two, I'm all about transparency, and as a part of transparency, individuals and organizations can have very candid conversations. You know, I work for Wipro, I work for somebody else, and I want to, you know, play in a band at night or work on some project that I'm working on, et cetera, over the weekend. And that's an open conversation, and then the two adult individuals, the organization and the individual, can make a concerted choice about whether that works for them or doesn't work for them as an organization. The point I was alluding to more is the reality is that there are people today working for Wipro and working directly for one of our competitors. Right? We've actually discovered 300 people in the last few months who are doing exactly that. To me, it's a complete violation of integrity in its deepest form. So that was what I was referring to. There's no space for someone to work for Wipro and competitor X, Y, and Z, and I think they would feel exactly the same way if they were to discover the same situation. So that's what I meant, and so I do stand by what I said, that I do think it's a violation of integrity if you're moonlighting in that shape and form.
Yeah, no, clearly, because there's a responsibility that you take the moment you join a company. You have a certain role and a responsibility and access to lots and lots of facilities and information. So it's also your job to protect that rather than to be out of that sphere. So there's another question on what's your thought on emotional well-being in a corporate word for employees?
Yeah, no, it's a great question and observation. You know, I find the conversation in the last couple of years, just at Wipro, for example, I'm using that as a lens that I have, has changed fundamentally from just being about physical well-being to being about employee well-being, right? So, for example, we now have an employee assistance program where we have counselors available 24/7 across the globe. We have a program called Mitra, which is an ability to actually connect and talk to people inside of the organization when things are, you know, times are tough. So a huge focus on how do we bring an open dialogue around just mental well-being to the table. And I think COVID has accelerated it. It's brought it to the forefront, which perhaps didn't happen before. And I think organizations should really be talking about this. It really is a huge challenge across the globe over, and we need to be talking about this much more visibly and publicly. You know, I read a statistic once, and I still find it shocking that the number of people in large organizations that suffer from some sort of just well-being challenge from a mental perspective is to the tune of 40 to 50%, which is an enormous number. I still struggle to believe it, but it's an enormous number.
Yeah, so no, it's not unbelievable. In fact, there are a number of other aspects and factors which we need to keep in mind. In any group, if you look at this room here, there will be 20+% people who will have a learning disability, and they may not even know it themselves. In our society, the way we treat people, we'll say, this kid is a duffer. He has no interest in studies. You know, she or is just goofing away. And things of this nature, without actually looking at this with some empathy and understanding, because that can be managed and tackled too, with just more sensitive management.
Right.
And there is expertise available today in the world. And increasingly in India, this is one of the things that COVID did over the last 2 years. The acceptance of mental challenges, mental disabilities, of depression, of mental disease came to the fore. And for the first time, I heard people talking about this, about themselves or members of their family, which otherwise was, the norm was to hide it.
Right.
The norm was to not talk about this. And I think this is wonderful that we are becoming a more open society, accepting differences, accepting impairments, accepting disabilities.
Right.
And I think the next step would be to start to work on these in a productive, positive manner, because it is manageable.
I fully agree with you. It has really come to the forefront. People are not embarrassed about it anymore.
Yep.
Which
So
is
somebody's raised a question with the recent loss of Cyrus Mistry and Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, asking, are we living for money or money for living? Why not to love yourself?
I don't know if I followed that question, but look, these are personal choices in terms of what gives you pleasure, what makes you happy, and at the end of the day, you know, people have to make personal choices about how they sleep well. Right? I think sleeping restfully to me is a great indicator of how you're living your life to the terms of what is important to you and what you resonate with. I'm a big believer in that, by the way, sleep.
Yep. So there's two questions about Wipro. Make in India, how much Wipro top line would be? I can't understand what's written here. In tech and manufacturing. And the next one is how the sales and animal spirit of Chief Growth Officer goes along the team. I read about Carpe Diem as a value in one of your annual reports. How does this work with each other? How do these two things work together?
I don't know if I followed that, Sunil, but...
Nor do I fully, but I shall try and reword it.
Yeah.
I think what he's asking is, on the one hand, you're saying go and grab whatever you can. Then you're saying we want to be a thoughtful company. Yeah. Can the two
Sunil,
coexist?
I'm a big believer they can coexist. You know, one of the things, journeys we're also at Wipro is how do we build a high-performance organization? Yep. And I'll tell you what I mean by a high-performance organization. An organization that is very, very results-oriented, very growth-obsessed, risk-taking, bold, decisive, focused on output and outcomes, doesn't confuse input and loyalty for output and outcomes. And so have a very, very strong capitalistic results orientation, and at the same time be an organization with a soul that is collaborative and cohesive and cares about the environment in which it works in and is giving. And those can really, really coexist. I deeply believe that, right? It doesn't mean to suggest that there's a direct correlation between giving and results, but they can absolutely coexist. And I really believe that.
So there are a couple of questions about India. Where do you see India as a socio-economic power in the next 5 years? And how will Wipro contribute to the growth of India being a 5 trillion economy?
Yeah. No, I think the technology industry, more than Wipro, I think has a great opportunity to participate in this whole economy that's becoming more and more digitalized as we move forward. I mean, it's remarkable how inclusive we're getting the opportunity to be with the kind of revolution we're driving in this digital-first way of how we engage as an economy. So that I'm very, very excited about how companies like technology companies like Wipro and the industry more broadly can participate. Look, I'm very bullish about the next 5, 10 years.
Your mic's gone off. You want to use this one? Yeah. Can we get the mic, the other mic working, please?
Maybe that's a sign we should...
Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, I'm very bullish about the next 5, 10 years for the country. I'm a big believer in the spirit of entrepreneurialism that exists in the country. We have a huge runway in terms of becoming a much, much more prevalent consumption economy with consumers growing every day in the country. So I'm deeply positive and excited about how the next 5, 10 years unfold for the country.
Do you have a view on the compulsion that has been put on CSR in companies? Do you think it's a good idea to have compulsory CSR? Or should it be more participatory, more voluntary, more cooperative by companies and groups of companies?
Yeah. No, you know, we were discussing this earlier, Sunil. Look, first of all, it already exists. So many of us have just gotten used to it. And now, I am supportive of a mechanism that very formally encourages people to give who may not have the tendency to give otherwise and play their responsible role as corporate citizens. So the simple answer to that question is yes, that I am supportive of that mindset and DNA.
So let me tell you a little bit about what was happening when the CSR conversation started. I was then president CII, and I was asked to stand up on behalf of industry and push back and saying this is not a good idea. And I genuinely believed it was not a good idea, because our belief was that many of us were actually doing more than that already. And that would be a problem, and we were doing it without making any public announcements. And that, going back to the earlier argument, I didn't think it was a great idea for those who don't want to have to talk about this. And second, there would be those who would start fudging these numbers, as unfortunately has happened in some of the other places where you put a compulsion. I have to say though, I was wrong. Not everybody, but many companies have started doing a fantastic job. Some of them doing it themselves, bringing corporate experience, management methodologies and techniques to organized foundation work, organized social work, and some of them funding other organizations who are doing good work. So there are many aspects of societal need which are now getting addressed much better than they used to be. Is it all where we need to be? Of course, there is still some distance to go, actually a long way to go. But I clearly think we are in the right direction, because the better companies or the better organized institutions and organizations are getting both encouragement, support, and funding to do more. And I think what is missing right now is ideas sharing. We don't know enough. There are amazing examples of islands of excellence, because that's one thing I think which is still missing in the general common experience of India. Talent is there, but focus on excellence on everything that you do is still a rarity. And I believe this is another area which needs and deserves and is crying out for this. If we can do that, share the examples where great work is being done, find ways to expand the influence of an area of scope of those, I think we would have served both the country and society well. And this is not just for the country. This is for the world at large, because the same ideas can then be shared with other parts of the world which have similar needs. And there are many other parts of the world which have needs even more than ours.
I just want to make two comments on that.
You'll need that again.
I just want to make two comments on that. Sunil. One is, I fully agree, best practice sharing can be very powerful, and associations like AIMA can be very, very powerful, and other associations as well. The other is, I think we've got to move away from this mindset that we start with the premise that people are mistrustworthy, or start with the premise that people are dishonest. Right? There's a lot of organizations and human beings that want to do the right thing. And if we start with that premise also, I think we can make a lot of progress than the premise that, look, everybody's going to try and find a way to work around it. My experience has been, I share this on education, that our big learning has been with just government school teachers, is the vast majority of them are actually sincere people and showing up every day to do the right thing, right? It's remarkable. And I'll share a last story before we go. We run these sessions on a weekend, right, where teachers travel 35, 40 kilometers on their own dime, on their own time, just to be a better teacher, right? How many, and they get served lunch, they don't get paid, right, on a Sunday. How many of us in our organizations could get people to come in on a Sunday, on their own dime, on their own time, just to be a better professional, right? So there's a lot of good that people are trying to do, and we've got to start from a place of giving them the benefit of the doubt, unless they give us a specific reason not to give them.
So on that note of hope and aspiration, and I think all is good with the human spirit, we just need to keep reaching out and doing a little bit more than whatever we are doing today, do a little bit more tomorrow. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, sirs, for an inspiring session. May I request Mr. Nikhil Sawhney, Vice President AIMA, to present the mementos to the esteemed speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we've come to the end of yet another interesting session, but please remain seated as we will begin with our next session immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the last session of this convention, which is on the importance of being India's changing role in G20. Agree, 30% disagree, and 25% cancel. The poll question for this session is, India can save G20 from irrelevance despite disorder in its rank. Please do participate and share your opinion. Please welcome on stage with a huge round of applause Mr. Amitabh Kant, India's Sherpa for the G20, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, President AIMA and Chairman and Managing Director, CavinKare Private Limited, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President AIMA and Chairman, Dempo Group of Companies, Mr. Nikhil, Vice President AIMA and Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Triveni Turbine Limited, and Ms. Rekha Sethi, Director General, All India Management Association. May I request Ms. Rekha Sethi to deliver the introductory remarks, please?
Mr. Amitabh Kant, India's Sherpa for the G20, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, President AIMA, Mr. Srinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President AIMA, Nikhil, Vice President AIMA, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you all with us for this session, and thank you so much for joining us in the valedictory session of the National Management Convention. Amitabh, many thanks for joining us today and for agreeing to address the convention. We're always keen to end on a high note, and it couldn't get better with you giving the valedictory address. You have been a friend of AIMA's, and we truly value your association with us. It is always a pleasure to have you. It's also great to have the AIMA President, Senior Vice President, and Vice President on the dais together, CKR, Srini, and Nikhil. Many thanks for joining us. As usual, great to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been, I think, a successful NMC, but you are the best judge of that. And it is very satisfying to see a full house, even towards the conclusion of the convention. Your enthusiasm has been amazingly high throughout, and you have energized your speakers and panelists in each session. We are confident that you would leave the convention on a high after Amitabh's passionate address on the importance of being India and its changing role in G20. The world is changing, and so is India. India is getting stronger while the existing world order is under stress. The timing is perfect for India to step up and play a decisive role in reorganizing global governance and cooperation. Importantly, India has an ambitious leadership that wants to make India a fulcrum of world economy and geopolitics. G20 is the best forum for India to demonstrate its progress and its leadership prowess. However, it would not be an easy task given the growing polarization in the global economy and the community and escalating weaponization of food, energy, finance, and technology. As the next leader of G20, India has a tricky task to make peace and bring back focus on bolstering the world economy and global institutions. Still, I'm confident that with Mr. Amitabh Kant spearheading the efforts, India will be able to show that its time to lead the world has come. With these words, I would once again like to thank Mr. Kant and all the brilliant speakers and panelists over the last 2 days. I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us for AIMA's 49th National Management Convention. With these words, once again, a big thank you, and may I now invite the President of AIMA, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, to give the welcome address.
Mr. Amitabh Kant, India's Sherpa for G20, Shrinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President AIMA, Nikhil, Vice President AIMA, Rekha Sethi, Director General AIMA, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you in the valedictory session of the 49th National Management Convention. We have had a very exciting discussions over the past couple of days, and who better to have the final word than one of India's most articulative leaders of the 21st century, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Mr. Kant, it's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining us at the climax of the National Management Convention. A very warm welcome to you. I'm also pleased to welcome AIMA colleagues, Mr. Srinivas Dempo, Mr. Nikhil, and Mrs. Rekha Sethi. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining me in this session. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no exaggeration to say that the world is in a mess again. Just a COVID grip began to loosen up. The world is caught in the vice of war. The war in Ukraine and the hostilities between the Western and the Eastern powers are imposing severe costs on not just the participants, but on the whole wide world. The COVID cost shortages are getting worse, and the disruption of energy and food trade is driving up inflation. Many economies are teetering on the edge of another recession, and even the fast-growing economies are feeling the drag of the disruption and uncertainty. The trend of countries shifting attention to geopolitics issues amid economic struggles is growing, and there is an urgent need to bring everybody's focus back to the economy. The present world has to be smarter than it was in the previous century, which was marked by many cycles of recession, war, and rebuilding boom. In this environment, India's coming presidency of G20 becomes a very significant. G20 is clearly the most important forum for economic cooperation, as its members represent the bulk of the global GDP. This group was formed at the peak of the financial crisis, and it has played a key role in coordinating cooperation among the large economies since then. As India prepares for the presidency of G20 in 2023, there is a dire need for reducing tensions among its members and bring some of them back on talking terms. At the same time, it is a great opportunity for India to prove that it has arrived as a global leader. India's biggest task probably will be to bring the focus back on economic development and growth to get the G7 countries to align their thinking with the new realities of the global economy. Even the new distribution of power. Mr. Kant, shaping the agenda for India's presidency for G20, I am sure that India will have its say in setting the priorities of the world's most important group. As we are in the valedictory session of the National Management Convention, I want to thank all my colleagues at AIMA for putting an excellent convention. The NMC also happens to be my swan song as the president of AIMA, and I'm extremely pleased to be the signing off on a high after a year made difficult by COVID. Signing off on a high after a year made difficult of COVID was not this thing is not a smooth ride, but I think very nice to see you all physically here. I have learned a lot during my presidency of AIMA, and I have built deep friendship that I will always cherish. I am grateful to everyone who made my life easier as AIMA president. My fellow office bearers, Mr. Srinivas Dempo, Ms. Nikhil Sawhney, AIMA Council, Executive Board members, past presidents of AIMA, the AIMA Secretariat, the LMA leaders, and all those who have proved important inputs and critique. I'm sure you all have witnessed the kind of grand gala so far that has happened. I think it is important to recognize the AIMA Secretariat and the able leader, Director General Rekha Sethi, led by the kind of this thing. I think wonderful job done, Rekha and team. I can't thank you enough for making my life easier. I take pleasure in welcoming Srinivas Dempo as the incoming president of AIMA. Srini, you have been a fantastic colleague at AIMA, and many thanks for all your guidance and support during my tenure of AIMA president. I am confident that AIMA will benefit immensely from your youthful vision and dynamism. I see AIMA becoming more agile and resilient under your innovative leadership. Thank you for everything, and also my best wishes. Though my tenure as AIMA president is coming to an end, I will always be there for AIMA whenever the organization needs me. Moving on with the business of this session, we have to present the year's Best LMA Awards. The LMAs are the pillars of the national management movement, and AIMA tries to acknowledge their contribution, motivate them for continuous excellence by facilitating the best LMAs in different categories. I now hand over the session to the MC to take it forward from here. Thank you. Thanks once again.
Thank you, Mr. Ranganathan. We now have a very special felicitating ceremony, ladies and gentlemen, where we will acknowledge the tremendous work being done by our local management associations. AIMA introduced the Best LMA Award in the year 1988-89 to recognize the contributions and efforts of its local management associations towards creating institutional excellence. AIMA has 6 affiliated local management associations spread across the country. These LMAs are the frontline soldiers of the national management movement, and it has been AIMA's endeavor to encourage healthy competition between the LMAs to further promote quality and excellence. The award jury this year was chaired by Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, past president AIMA and chairman and managing director, Kirloskar Brothers Group. The other members of the jury included Mr. Srinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President AIMA and Chairman, Dempo Group of Companies, Mr. P. Balaji, Chief Regulatory and Corporate Affairs Officer, Vodafone Idea Limited, Mr. Vijay Thadani, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, NIIT Limited, Dr. J.S. Juneja, Past President AIMA and Chairman, Global Projects and Services Limited, Mr. Krishnan Kalra, Past President AIMA, Mr. Richard Reiki, Board Member, KPMG in Dubai, Dr. Bhimarya Maitri, Director IIM Nagpur, Ms. Vinita Bajuria, Chairperson Nicco Cables Limited, Mr. Sunil Bhaskaran, CEO and Managing Director AirAsia India, Mr. Siddhant Kaul, Managing Director Nicco Engineering Services Limited, Mr. Ajay Mehta, VP and Region Head APAC Trustonic. Deloitte was the knowledge partner and evaluated all the applications. Thank you, Deloitte, for doing some excellent work. At this award session, we acknowledge the contributions of the local management associations to the national management movement and felicitate those LMAs that have done the best work during the year. There are different categories of LMAs, and we celebrate outstanding achievements in each of these categories. This year, 31 LMAs participated in the award process, and we will be felicitating the winning LMAs under each category in this session. May I now request the chief guest of the session, Mr. Amitabh Kant, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, Mr. Srinivas Dempo, Mr. Nikhil Sawhney, and Ms. Rekha Sethi to please present the awards to the winners. Ladies and gentlemen, we start with the Most Improved LMA Award for the year 2021-22. And the winner is Category 4 of the Best LMA Awards, we have two awards, the runners-up and the winner. The runners-up in the Category 4 for the year 2021-22 is the Navsari Management Association. May I invite team from Navsari Management Association represented by Mr. Lalit Pandya, President, and Mr. Hardik Naik, Past President, to come forward and receive the award. And Mr. Jagwant Singh Mangat, AGM, Indore Management Association, to please come forward and receive the award. Now it's time to honor the winner under Category 3. The winner in the Category 3 for the year 2021-22 is the Thrissur Management Association. May I invite Engineer Vinod Manchila, immediate past President, and Engineer Francis George, CEO, Thrissur Management Association, to come forward and receive. Moving on to the next award, we have the Category 2 of the Best LMA Awards. The winner in Category 2 for the year 2021-22 is the winner in Category 2 for the year 2021-22 is the Kerala Management Association. May I invite Ms. L. Nirmala, President, and R. Madhwan Chandran, immediate past President. Management Association by contributing immensely in their area towards enhancing the competence of professional management and by doing some excellent Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the award presentation ceremony. May I request all of you to please give a huge round of applause for all the awardees today. Thank you, Mr. Kant, for presenting the awards. May I now request you to please deliver the keynote address?
Mr. Ranganathan, Mr. Dempo, Mr. Sawhney, Rekha Sethi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I've been a long time admirer of AIMA, and I've been a frequent speaker here. So I'm truly delighted to be speaking here at this valedictory function. I've been asked to speak on the importance of being India, and the changing role of India in G20. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are two very complex issues: the importance of being India and the changing role of India in G20. So let me first dwell on G20. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very fractured world outside. You have the Russia-Ukraine war, which is going on for about last 7.5 months. You have the China-Taiwan crisis. Global supply chains are disrupted. The post-COVID era has seen people go back on sustainable development goals because health, education, nutrition, all have got impacted. Global trade, which has lifted vast segments of population above poverty and has accelerated growth, has got impacted. Global trade will slow down. And global debt is an all-time high. So when the Western world was growing and expanding, global trade was growing, global debt was growing, and they had the luxury of industrializing without carbonizing. So they actually, with carbonizing, and they had actually polluted the whole world while industrializing. India's key challenge will be that we'll have to grow and expand at a time when global trade will slow down. There will be the geopolitical world will get more complex. The global debt will slow down because global debt is already high, very high. And India will have to be the first country in the world, which will have to industrialize without carbonizing. That is the challenge. Now, G20 is a grouping of 20 leading countries in the world, which account for about 85% of the global GDP. They account for about 78% of the global trade. They account for about 2/3 of the population of the world, and they account for about close to 90% of the global patents. Now, G20 is important because UN is too large and too unwieldy an issue, a platform, and as you've seen even in the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the United Nations General Assembly, its Security Council has not been able to play a critical and an important role. So UN has become an unwieldy body. G7 is a rich man's club. It is too elitist, and in 2009, 2008, it was felt that when
the global economic crisis arose, it was felt by the G7 leaders that it is not possible for G7 alone to solve the problems of the world, and therefore it was expanded into G20. Now G20 covers a lot of emerging markets. It has all the leading countries of the world, but it also has emerging markets. And therefore, it's supposed to be the most powerful grouping in the world. The most powerful grouping in the world because it accounts for about 85% of the global GDP. And when a major crisis arises in economic, financial structure, on issues of social progress, etc., G20 has always played a leading role. The challenge right now is that it's a fractured world with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Indonesia is presently the host of G20. It is finding it extremely complex because the G7 countries are not willing to sit and discuss any issue with Russia because they say that while G20 is an economic and financial grouping, but the consequences of the war and conflict in Russia-Ukraine also have an impact on global energy. They also have an impact on global food crisis. And therefore, conflict and war have to be the first and foremost issue at this point of time. That's the view of the G7. View of many others is that issues of war and conflict need to be discussed in the United Nations, and we need to move on with issues of economics, of finance, of growth, of progress, all these issues in the G20. That is the challenge under which India will take over the presidency of the G20 later this year. And the challenge will be that when we take over the presidency, the dollar would have accelerated, it would have got strengthened, inflation would be getting tightened across the world, and therefore you will see recession in vast parts of the world. Recession, global growth will be a key challenge. And therefore, how do you accelerate the pace of growth will be one challenge. The second challenge will be that you will have to bring issues of climate action center stage, because it's important that the world glows with sustainability. While we have not contributed to pollution in the world, we have occupied a very limited space in the carbon space. Our occupation of the total carbon space of 2004 gigatons at 1.5 degrees, only 52 gigatons, which is 1.5%, whereas we are entitled on a per capita basis of 18.5%. But climate action will be center stage, and the third will be because the world has got impacted due to COVID on health, education, on nutrition. The world has actually regressed rather than progressed. How do you accelerate the pace of implementation on many of these issues of sustainable development goals will also be a key challenge. Now with these challenges, India will have to push the narrative on some of these issues and also push the India narrative. And India narrative is important because we've done some exceptional thing during this period. We have, as you are aware, become the 5th largest economy recently. And we are heading towards being the 3rd largest economy in the world in due course. But it's also important to say that we've done some very exceptional things. We've done exceptional things because if you were to look at the public digital infrastructure that India has created, is very unique. It's unlike the big tech infrastructure which the Western world has created, where data is owned by some leading tech companies. In case of India, we've created public digital goods, individual identity. 1.4 billion people have identity, 1.4 billion people have bank accounts, 1.4 billion people have mobile, what we call the Jam Trinity. And actually, since 2015, 320 million new bank accounts were created. Many of us do not realize this, but this is equivalent to the population of the United States of America. And every second bank account opened after 2015 has been opened in India. And 320 million new bank accounts is twice the population of Russia. So basically, in 7 years, what we have done is equivalent to giving every citizen of United States and twice the number of citizens of Russia with a new bank account. If you were to look at our digital payments, today, India is a leader on real-time transactions. Our total transactions in 2021 were close to about 49 billion. That is 3x of what China does and almost 7x greater than the payments of what USA and China do together. What digital payments of US, China, UK, France and Germany, all these countries, our digital payments are greater than that. There's several remarkable things, and it's important to tell you this because it's not just that we do 3x of China, 7x greater than the combined digital payments of USA, Canada, UK, France and Germany. If you were to look at housing, and under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, affordable houses have been provided to 30 million Indians, that is 3 crore citizens, and most of them are in rural area. And actually, this is equivalent to providing every single citizen of Australia with a new home. Every single citizen of Australia with a new home. And if you were to look at roads, over 50,000 kilometers of highways have been built over 7 years. This is almost equivalent to total road network length of countries combined of Denmark, Taiwan and Czechoslovakian Republic, all 3 countries together. And in vaccination, in gross terms, we've been able to administer over 2.5 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses, which is roughly 6 times the population of the United States of America, 5 times the population of European Union, and 2.5 times the population of EU and USA combined. I'm speaking some of this because the subject given to me was the importance of being India. And it's important to tell you the transformation journey in terms of size and scale of what India has done. And if you look at health insurance, we have the world's largest publicly funded health insurance scheme covering 500 million Indians in the form of Ayushman Bharat scheme. And it covers more citizens than the entire population of the European Union. Entire population of the European Union. And if you were to look at electrification, over 30 million houses have been electrified over the last 7 years. In population terms, that is equivalent to electrifying the whole of Canada. And I can go on, but I don't want to dwell on this because it's important to say that India has done transformational work across water, across electrification, across Swachh Bharat, across health insurance, across vaccination, across road, across housing, across LED bulbs. In case of water, if you look at it, 81 million households, 81.1 crore new households have potable water under the Jal Jeevan mission. That means approximately every citizen of Brazil with clean drinking water. That is the level extent of this thing. But the important thing is that this has had a huge transformational impact in rural areas and at the grassroots level, and that should, over a period of time, I've been a long-term believer, that India has to grow at rapid rates. And India needs to grow despite these challenges which I talked about, despite the challenges of global supply chain, despite the challenge of the Russia-Ukraine war, despite the challenge of a post-COVID era, despite the challenge of global debts, India has to grow at rapid rates, and that is what the Prime Minister talked about in his Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. What Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav basically means is that India must transform itself in one generation. In one generation. And if you look around, if you were to look around, you would find that several countries of the world actually have done this. Japan did this between 1956 and 73. Korea has grown at rapid rates and did this between 1980 and 1990. Singapore has done this between 60 and 72, and China has done it between 1995 and 2010. They've all grown at rates of 9 to 10% per annum. During this period, grew at 9 to 10% per annum year after year, year after year, year after year. Now, India has grown at those rates. Let me tell you, India has grown at those rates, but India has grown at those rates for a relatively small period of 5 to 6 years. India needs to grow at high rates of 9 to 10% for a 3-decade period. And if it grows at 3-decade period, we should understand that we'll transform India in one generation. It's also important to understand that while we are the 5th biggest economy in the world, our per capita income is $2,100. And if you were to grow at 6% from now till 2047, you will see that the Indian economy will have a size of about 16.4 million. If you were to grow at about 8%, your economy will have a size of about 20.6 trillion. But if you were to grow at about 10%, the size of the economy will be about close to 32.6 trillion. That is the power of the compounding power of growth. The acceleration you get when you are growing at higher rates is enormous, And that means that from $2,100 per capita, actually if you grow at 10% per annum, year after year, year after year, year after year, you will take the per capita income to about close to $23,000 for every single citizen of India. And that means that you would have transformed the lives of every single citizen of India. And this is very important, that you would have really transformed the life of every single citizen of India. And this is really the key to my mind. Now, it's also important to say that if India is to grow at those high rates, a lot of reforms have been carried out in India in terms of ease of doing business. We've done a lot of radical reforms on scrapping rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, acts. We've made things simpler. We've jumped up hugely on the ease of doing business. We've brought in the goods and services tax. We've done the IBC, the RERA. We've reduced the corporate tax. Vast number of reforms have been carried out by the central government. My belief is that if India is to grow at those high rates for a long period of time, it's very important that the states of India grow. Because India is a very large country. It's bigger than 25 countries of Europe, plus another 30,000 kilometers. So states need to grow. And if states need to grow, these reforms, these vast reforms which India has carried out in ease of doing business, on bringing digitization, in actually making things simpler for the private sector to work, in accelerating the pace of growth has to happen in the Indian states. And therefore, it's important that states like Goa and Sikkim, it's important to understand this, that if you look at India's per capita, India's average per capita income, states like Goa and Sikkim are growing at almost 5x the average per capita income of India. There are states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, which are going at about 2.5x of what India is growing at. But there are states like Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, all these states are growing at about 0.4, 0.5% of the average states of India, growth of India. So unless these states need to accelerate the pace of growth, and if these states grow, they will really transform India. And therefore, my view is that states will play a very, very critical role in the coming years. And that is the importance of being India. The importance of being India is that we are a federal polity. We are a federation of states. States have to become the champion of growth, and they have to be the key driver of India's growth. And if they grow, it's very important to understand that in India, the share of agriculture is still very high. Agriculture sector contributes about 19% to our GDP, whereas world average is 4.3%. 49% of our population works in agriculture. The worldwide average is about 7 or 8%. And therefore, you need to take people from agriculture and put them into industry and services and in urbanization and ensure that they get better paid wages. That is what has happened in the world. People have moved from agriculture to manufacturing to industry. And therefore, there are three critical things to my mind which is important. First is that we need to build top-class, world-class infrastructure, which is happening across areas. The Gati Shakti plan, the national infrastructure pipeline, the logistic policies are all a culmination of what the government of India is aiming to do by creating top-class infrastructure. The second is that we need to urbanize and we need to do top-class, world-class urbanization in a very sustainable manner. We need to create new cities, which is on the back of public transportation. We need to actually give... Why I'm saying that this is necessary is because we should understand that there are two cities in Japan, Tokyo and Osaka, whose GDP is more than the GDP of Uttar Pradesh. And within Uttar Pradesh, this GDP of Gautam Budh Nagar, one city which is industrialized, Noida and Greater Noida, is 10x more than the second city of Uttar Pradesh, that is Kanpur. So what growth urbanization gives you, nothing else will give you. Good, sustainable urbanization. And that is an opportunity because 500 million Indians are going to get into the process of urbanization in the next 5 decades. And that is a huge new opportunity for India to pole vault in the coming years. The third key challenge for India, as I see it, is that you bring in competitive efficiency. And this competitive efficiency is because I am a believer that India should be driven by its private sector. And that was what the Prime Minister said, that India's growth must be driven by the private sector. The government should act as a facilitator and a catalyst. And Indian private sector must be highly efficient, competitive, and get into sunrise areas of growth, because all the growth will happen in new areas of growth. And the new areas of growth will be electronics, there'll be battery, there'll be advanced chemistry cell battery, there'll be electric mobility. There's a huge disruption taking place. I think we need to think about new areas of growth, all completely new areas of growth which will transform the world. Areas of artificial intelligence, area of digital public goods, area of digitization, areas of industry 4.0. Those will enable you to technologically leapfrog. And those are very, very critical for the world. And our ability to use vast amounts of data that we are already generating through individual identity, what we are doing you should be able to use that data through artificial intelligence, machine learning to find many of the solutions to the problems of India. We've demonstrated both in digital public goods that we can be world class. We are way ahead of the developed world in digital public goods. We established that actually a completely new model of payments can come from India, not from the western part of the world. We demonstrated in our startup movement. In our startup movement, we demonstrated when we started the Startup India movement, there were just 106 startups. Today, we have 78,000 startups in India. We have 107 unicorns in India. So these are people who are disrupting the world, and they are finding a solution to the challenges of India on food supply, on education, on health, on a vast range of new areas, on transportation, many of them. Our challenges are very different from the Western world. The Western world is innovating on driverless cars. India doesn't need that. India needs solution to education, health, nutrition, food supplies, agriculture, productivity, value-added products. And that is what our startups are finding a solution to. And when they find solutions to the problems of India, they're finding a solution not for the 1.4 billion people of India, they're finding a solution for the next 4 to 5 billion people of the world who are moving from poverty to middle class across the world. So the market is huge if you are able to produce and come out with innovative products for the rest of the world. So what India has demonstrated is truly these great examples of startup, these great examples of digital goods, these great examples of individual identity, the great examples of how we have disrupted the world in many of these new areas of growth. And I think that is the narrative which we would like to put before the world during G20, that there is a model, a different model from the Western part of the world, which needs to be emulated. It's not a model of big tech, it's a model of creating digital goods on top of which we've allowed private sector to compete. So PhonePe competes with Google Pay, Paytm competes with WhatsApp, Ola competes with Uber. All of them compete in the marketplace, but on top of public goods. And that is what, to my mind, is truly unique about India. So G20 is a unique, a totally unique grouping of the world. It's a very, very powerful grouping. It's the most powerful grouping in the world. We'll see 200 events being held in India in 55 cities across India. That is what the Prime Minister has desired, that we should actually use every single state of India, every single union territory of India, and use this opportunity to really improve our infrastructure across India, bring out the best cultural talent across India, and really demonstrate the best of India. And that is what we'll do during this period. We will use this period to drive global growth. We'll use this period to accelerate SDGs. We'll use this period to really push climate action, but we'll build up a very strong India narrative for the rest of the world to emulate of what we've done in India. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Kant, for your inspiring address. May I now request Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President, AIMA, to deliver the concluding remarks, please.
Mr. Amitabh Kant, who just gave a brilliant address, CKR, Nikhil, Rekha, and all of you, ladies and gentlemen. We've just come to the end of this 49th National Management Convention. And what better way to end with such a positive speech? I was telling Mr. Kant when we were sitting just before the session began, I said, every time I hear you, I become more positive about India. And it instills me a greater sense of pride about my country. And we have to be proud, because today we are the second largest steel producer in the world. We are the fourth largest auto producer in the world. We are the second largest mobile phone producers in the world. I think 10 years back, we were nowhere. Of course, we are far behind China in steel production. The scale at which China grew is something that, as Mr. Kant says, is an opportunity and challenge for us. Once again, Mr. Kant, thank you so much for being a friend and supporter of AIMA and educating us with your brilliant speech. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a privilege of having some of the most eminent leaders, not only from industry, but from government, technology, academia, defense, at this convention. We are truly indebted at AIMA that the Honorable Vice President of India, Mr. Jagdeep Dhankar, opened the 49th National Management Convention on a very high note, which was followed by two brilliant addresses from one of our most productive and one of our most positive ministers, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, Minister for Roads and Highways, as also Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, who was so articulate as the Minister for Civil Aviation and Steel. They both joined us at the convention and shared their vision with us. I also thank the Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. Ananta Nageshwaran, who gave us a very lucid talk on the state and prospects of the Indian economy and where it's heading. And today, Mr. Kant further deliberated on the challenges and opportunities, particularly at the G20 level, where we have a leadership role to play in one of the most unprecedented times with new challenges and, as he says, both the challenge of sustainability and inclusive development. A special thanks to the Navy Chief, Admiral Hari Kumar, for addressing the convention and also talking to us about India's defense preparedness and how we can cooperate as an industry with military. We were privileged to have many of India's leading CEOs. You just a while back heard the brilliant Mr. Rishad Premji, who spoke about vital issue of lending with purpose, while Mr. Rajive Kaul, Singhania, Mr. Harshavardhan Neotia, and Mr. Mohandas Pai took part in a very exciting panel discussion on navigating the uncertainty that we are all saddled with. There was also an excellent panel discussion on women's freedom of work and career opportunities, which was contributed by AIMA's Women Council. I personally thank Sunita Reddy, Vinita Bajoria, Arshi Ayub, Mohammad Zaveri, Milan Vora, and Palki Sharma for joining us in this discussion. We also had the youngsters, and an outstanding discussion took place at India's Jenny, the entrepreneurial generation. I thank Karthik Sharma, Siddharth Pai, Rahul Garg, and Amit Shukla for this very futuristic and exciting session. To top it up, we had a session with Mr. Saurabh Mukherjee, who gave us an insight into the reforms process and how the markets are looking at it. My very special thanks to all the moderators, starting with our president, Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, Sudhir Jalan, Sunil Kant Munjal, Mr. T.V. Narendran, Mr. Sanjeev Bikchandani, Mr. Pranjal Sharma, and Vikram Chandra for playing such a wonderful role and steering the discussions to a very interesting and exciting level. My compliments and my personal congratulations, and also on behalf of AIMA, to Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Pati Singhania, and Mr. Raman Garg, who were inducted as AIMA Fellows during this year's National Management Convention. I deem it a privilege to extend my congratulations to Upinder Dhar and GF Limited for winning the AIMA Keval Nohoria Award for Academic Leadership in Management Education and R.K. Swamy High Performance Brand Award, respectively. This is an occasion to acknowledge and celebrate excellence amongst our LMAs. As you just saw a while back, our chief guest, Mr. Amitabh Kant, handed over many of this year's award winners, prizes. Many congratulations to Madras Management Association, Kerala Management Association, Thrissur Management Association, and Jamshedpur Management Association for winning the Best LMA Award in their respective categories. I also congratulate all the runners-up in category 3 and 4, that's Indore and Navsari Management Association. A special congratulations to Bharuch Management Association for winning the Most Improved LMA Award, and wish you all success to further your objectives of being one of the best association in the future. This would not have been possible without the support from sponsors. Their support has been very crucial and important in mounting this event at such a large scale. A big thank you to our principal sponsor, Reliance Industries, who have always supported us in many, many ways, and we truly valued their support. I also want to thank our sponsors, Apollo Hospitals, Dempo Group, co-sponsors, CavinKare Private Limited, and Triveni Turbine for their very generous support. Sincere thanks to Ambuja Neotia Group, IOC, JK Papers, Kirloskar Brothers, Neo Foods, Nestle India, NTPC Limited, RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, Tata Chemicals, and Vodafone Idea for their valuable support as associate sponsors. A special thanks to Bosch India, BSc Limited, Engineers India, Firebird Institute of Research and Management, GAIL, GL Bajaj Institute of Technology and Management, HDFC Securities, MDI, Gurgaon, Nicco Services, Pattern International, Power Grid Corporation, Regent Lighting, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, and WAPCOs for supporting this convention, and we truly value your support. This is a special moment as the leadership in AIMA is going to change shortly, and I cannot but thank Mr. C.K. Ranganathan enough for providing the most excellent leadership to AIMA during the past year. It was not an easy year, CKR, for you, but I think your leadership, your firmness in deciding about issues, your leader as a team, and your involvement in involving all of us to take crucial decisions. We truly appreciate your exceptional leadership in this cause. I'm sure that AIMA will count on your support and will tap your wisdom into the future also. Thank you once again. I thank you all for your participation in the convention, and I'm confident that you have enjoyed and learned every moment in this convention. It's now my privilege to declare the 49th, and remember we have a very unique number, 50 years next year. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity again, and I would count on Rekha and her team's support for doing it as a special year, that is the 50th National Management Convention. We now officially declare the 49th National Management Convention closed. See you soon in the future AIMA program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dempo. May I request Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, President AIMA, to present mementos to Mr. Amitabh Kant, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, and Mr. Nikhil Sawhney as a token of our appreciation. May I request Ms. Rekha Sethi, Director General AIMA, to present a memento to Mr. Ranganathan. Thank you all. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we come to the end of AIMA's 49th National Management Convention. Thank you all for us make the convention a great success. We look forward to seeing you at the next set of AIMA programs soon. Lunch is being served in the same hall. Before we close, we would like to once again thank all our sponsors who have supported us at this convention and made it possible for us to organize it at this larger scale. A big thank you to our principal sponsors, Reliance Industries Limited. We greatly value your support. We also thank our sponsors, Apollo Hospitals Group and Dempo Group, co-sponsors CavinKare Private Limited and Triveni Turbine Limited for their generous support. Sincere thanks to Ambuja Neotia Group, Indian Oil Corporation Limited, JK Papers Limited, Kirloskar Brothers Limited, Neo Foods Private Limited, Nestle India Limited, NTPC Limited, RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, Tata Chemicals Limited, and Vodafone Idea Limited for their valuable support as associate sponsors. We would also like to thank Bosch India Limited, BSC Limited, Engineers India Limited, Firebird Institute of Research and Management, GAIL India Limited, GL Bajaj Institute of Technology and Management, HDFC Securities Limited, MDI Gurgaon, Nicco Engineering Services Limited, Patent International, Power Grid Corporation of India Limited, Regent Lighting, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, and Babcos Limited for supporting the convention. We also have the results of the poll question of this session. India can save G20 from irrelevance despite disorder in its rank. 75% people agree, 15% disagree, and 10% can't say. Thank you all.